Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the October 28th Oklahoma City Planning Commission meeting. And if you're not familiar with how we do business here, if you are not the applicant and you wish to address us on an item, sign-up sheets like these are on the table right outside the chambers, and if you fill it in, give it to our secretary, we'd be happy to hear from you. If you have cell phones, pagers, or other electronic devices, we would ask that you silence or turn those off at this time, please. And we'll have to defer approval of the two sets of minutes because we don't have the requisite number of commissioners here to administer that, so we'll go right to continuances.
We have one uncontested request for continuance, which is item 15, SPUD 585, request to continue until November the 18th.
Is anyone here today to address us on that item, item 15 on our agenda? If not, commissioners?
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve the continuance of item 15. Cast your votes. And that's approved.
We have one new request for continuance, item 7, which is C6243, a request to continue until November the 18th.
That's my birthday.
And again, the same question. Did anyone come today to address us on item 7? Hearing none.
Move the new request.
Second. Second. We have a motion and a second to continue item 7. Cast your votes. Are there any continuous requests from the public today? Okay, I think we can go back to the minutes. We can't approve the September 23rd minutes because Commissioner Gales is not here, but we can approve the October 14th minutes. Any comments or changes to that?
Move approval.
Second. Okay, a motion and a second to approve the October 14th minutes. I'm not voting. I was not here. And those minutes are approved.
We are on items requiring separate vote. Item 1 is a request for a comprehensive plan land use amendment for the Glahn property at Southeast 149th Street and Sooner Road. This is concurrent with item 2, which is PUD 1422.
Not approved, 23rd.
Good afternoon. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. Also with me is Tim Johnson of Johnson Associates and Mr. Glahn, the property owner. Item 1 is a request to move the Environmental Conservation District line. As the line currently sits, which I believe they're going to pull a map up, the property that we are attempting to rezone today, almost all of it falls under the Environmental Conservation District. As the line currently sits, it was drawn arbitrarily. We have submitted topographic maps and other things to staff to show where along our property line the topographic break happens. And I'm going to let Tim Johnson get up here and explain why it is that we are requesting this particular spot for the new line.
Good afternoon, Tim Johnson, Johnson Associates, here also on behalf of the applicant. What David is talking about is the existing line that was in the OKC plan is this dark black, that solid line, and it was selected, probably from some old contour maps or maybe a lesser dense contour map. These light lines that you see squiggling all over the property over here are actual topographic survey lines. And the issue relative to this line is what flows into what would be the West Elm Creek Reservoir and what flows away from it. And so based on the actual topographic survey that was done for the property and the development to the east, this dash line is the request that we're making to move the conservation line to And that, I believe the staff has reviewed this, and they concur that this property all drains west and outside the basin of the West Elm Creek Reservoir. This little portion here drains north and east into what would be the West Elm Creek Reservoir. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Commissioners?
Tim, I've got a couple of questions. When the development was done, why didn't you request, you did that development also,
Yes, sir.
didn't you? Why didn't you request that to be removed from the Elm Creek conservation at that time?
Well, if you can see, the heavy line didn't really didn't affect the property that was being developed at that time, and we did not actually have detailed topo on this tract. We weren't involved in the strip at that time, so all we were dealing with was what became an RA zone tract of land.
Okay.
I think the better answer is we didn't represent the property owner that is now before you. We represented the developer that purchased the property for residential.
Okay. Well, the line that you've got drawn, where it goes into the subdivision, is the fall line also back to the north rather than to the south?
Yes, sir. Everything east and north of this line drains into what would be the West Elm Creek Reservoir.
Okay.
As part of the PUD that was done for that residential tract, we agreed to put in stormwater detention to capture the runoff and filter sediments and oils and things before it drains into the basin.
Okay, and that's the reason the north half of your property that you've got under request, the reason in the next application, the north side, that's north of the fall line, so that would be in the Elm Creek, but there's specific things you can do to eliminate the oil and gasoline and all that
Hazardous
stuff
impact to the water.
from going in. Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me, Jim, when was that the residential area approved? Can you remember?
It's probably been a couple of years, maybe 3 years ago.
Did I say yes?
Don't you always say yes?
Pretty much. No. Well, because it is, as you say, Jim, it's in the environmental, conservation area, and now there's houses. And so I assume that all the implementation of the protection for oil, gas runoff, and all the other stuff would be done.
And it was done, and in fact, as part of that discussion, it was a very lengthy discussion we had with the staff at that time, and some of that discussion had to do with the riparian water rights of the West Elm Creek Reservoir, which ended up resulting in a portion of this plat being purchased by the City Water Trust.
I think staff has a presentation to make to us about the plan amendment, so I think we ought to hear that. Aubrey?
Good afternoon. Aubrey Hammondtree with the Planning Department. I believe they're showing you some information that I am going to duplicate with this, but basically this is a short 4-slide presentation. It overviews what's written in the staff report about this property. They are asking to remove a portion of the environmental conservation from the comp plan land use designation to redesignate it as rural. What you see on your screen right now is showing with the green dashed line that portion which would then be drawn back to reflect what would become a rural land use designation. If you'll go ahead and advance to the next slide. The red box, thanks, Susan. The red box is showing you the concurrent item, which is the proposed PUD. So it shows you how the PUD actually expands beyond the area that we're recommending to go to a rural land use designation. And the reason for the request is because the property shown in red is proposing some low-intensity commercial and office uses, which are not allowed under the environmental conservation land use designation. There is a portion of the property at the corner of Sooner and 149th that's already zoned for C3. So there's some small commercial development already existing in that area. So this would allow the expansion of some low-density commercial and office to go to the north of that. And as Tim explained, the reason that these environmental conservation lines were drawn originally was to protect the watershed for the proposed West Elm Creek Reservoir. At the time, I believe that the topographic contours were not as specific as the information that we have today. When they submitted this information, we analyzed the contours, which shows that the drainage happens to the east side of the green line that you see on your map, falling into the West Elm Creek Reservoir. There's another green line that cuts through the planned unit development proposed about 2/3 of the way up. That drainage would fall south of that line. So the portion that they're recommending to move to rural would actually, the drainage would fall away from the West Elm Creek Reservoir. So for those reasons, that environmental conservation is really not serving a purpose for that area. So we recommend that this is an appropriate redesignation to rural in that area. There are no other environmental issues that we would want to consider retaining on the site. There's no vegetation, there are not existing trees, so we feel that that would be appropriate. However, the planned unit development you'd be considering next has Tract 2 north of this, which would drain into the environmental conservation area. And the land use plan limits development in that, and it does not permit commercial uses. So we are not recommending that, as you consider that next item, that we might talk about that next, but that would not be appropriate in that area. And if you have any questions about the comprehensive plan amendment, I'd be available to answer them.
I do have a question about the southeast sector plan. What did it propose along Sooner Road there?
There were no specific plan policies for Sooner Road. There were specific recommendations in the southeast sector plan to contain commercial uses to specific nodes in the sector. This was actually not designated as one of those commercial nodes, but there was a provision in the southeast sector plan that said small-scale, low-intensity commercial uses in other locations could be appropriate to support rural residential development, where we think that this proposal fits that criteria. So allowing small-scale, low-intensity commercial and office, even though it's not in one of the areas designated for commercial development, would be appropriate here. The reason that it was trying to target places for commercial growth was so that you wouldn't spur higher density residential into more of the rural areas. In this location in the southeast sector, there's not a lot of potential to spur additional growth. To the south is beyond our city limits. To the east is all environmental conservation. There are urban densities in the proximity. So allowing this commercial development to happen there, we feel is an appropriate response to the rural residential development.
Thank you. Any other questions of Aubrey? Thank you.
I do have another question. Do we need to re-examine the boundaries that have been set based on better data?
Yes, and with the new comprehensive plan, Plan OKC, we are taking a very specific look at what should be designated environmental conservation. Right now, that land use designation falls in many places in Oklahoma City, and some of the land that's designated environmental conservation is there for reasons that are pertaining to water quality. In other areas, it might exist because you have other conditions such as wetlands or trees. So the conservation of the environmental resource is not the same in all of those locations. And the information we have about where the line should be drawn, whether it's 100 feet to the south or the north, is also being determined. So although we can't change the comprehensive plan specifically right now to reflect all those criteria, it will be incorporated into the new comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be happy to answer any more questions. You guys have any? If not, we would ask for your approval.
Any questions on the plan amendment, Commissioners? Action.
I move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 1. Cast your votes, and that's approved.
Item 2 is the actual PUD, 1422, which is an application by Joseph Klein to rezone 14500 South Sooner Road from AA Agricultural to PUD 1422.
Good afternoon. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, on behalf of the applicant. Also with me is the applicant, Joseph Glahn, and Tim Johnson. Our PUD is asking for low-intensity office and commercial complex along Sooner Road. The staff has recommended approval of the PUD with 2 technical evaluations. The second technical evaluation we are in agreement with. The first asks that Tract 2 be removed from the PUD. Tract 2 is the portion that we just dealt with on the previous application, being north of the new line where the Environmental Conservation District will fall. The reason that they've asked to take it out is because of the concerns of the West Elm Creek Reservoir. we have in the PUD put things in effect to help all those concerns with stormwater runoff, bioretention if needed. I'm going to let Mr. Johnson come up here and explain the specific elements of the PUD that we took great care in putting in place to protect and ensure that the West Elm Creek Reservoir is not compromised.
Good afternoon again. What David is referring to is in the PUD we added some language that would require on-site detention/retention. But the bioretention issue is that's a process that is available to us today that wasn't really available to us 10 years ago on a small site basis. There are actual products on the market that are used specifically to protect watersheds from parking lot runoff. There are other means and methods of protecting the environment in an area like this, such as pervious paving, but some of those haven't been adopted by Oklahoma City yet. The bioretention, we feel, would be the most effective preventative measure that we could include in the PUD. And what that does is it takes any runoffs from hard surface, albeit a roof or a parking lot, puts it into a filtering system, and the water that comes out has been filtered. If designed properly, they only need maintenance about once every 5 years. And in a small application such as this, the net usable property on this small tract is just over 3 acres. And there are two things that will work towards keeping a very open space here. One is there's no public sewer available. So the sewer to serve this site would be small on-site septic systems. The type of systems that are allowed in residential are not allowed by state law in commercial. So you wouldn't see any land application. It would all be underground septic systems. So that's going to require, just by the nature of the septic fields, open space. So the amount of development going on the 3 acres won't be the same as other areas that would have public sewer. So with the open space, the mandatory bioretention or retention relative to the parking surface runoff, we feel that we've protected adequately the watershed for the West Elm Creek Reservoir.
Tim, what is the acreage of Tract 1 and Tract 2 separately? In other words, I know they're 12 point something together.
Well, Tract 1 is 3.7, but that's measured to the center of the section, and then Tract 2 is 3.7. Tract 1 is just over 10 acres, about 11 acres.
Okay. Thank you. Aubrey, do you or someone else from staff have a response to Tim's suggested solution here?
Well, our staff report is recommending it is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan on the basis that commercial uses in environmental conservation are typically not an appropriate use, and I do realize that there are mitigation measures that people can put into place for development that offsets risks, and in this case, the risk is perceived to be water quality. And so this development proposal is trying to respond to that. However, the comprehensive plan, Southeast Sector Plan, also has that statement in there about limiting commercial intensities and uses to smaller areas. This is not one of those areas designated as a commercial node. And our hesitation, and even though the drainage is being remedied with this solution, is that even chipping away into the environmental conservation area for uses that can take advantage of technologies like Tim discussed, still allows that commercial and office development to creep into the environmental conservation and can go further up Sooner Road. So we felt it was important to maintain that line where the ridge line occurs. We don't know if the West Elm Creek Reservoir will be built in the future, but the city has gone to a considerable expense in preserving and purchasing that land, and we felt that it would be prudent to allow that boundary to be drawn to the ridge line and not allow the commercial and office to encroach into the environmental conservation area.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions of David? Comments?
I have an observation. My vote in favor of the adjustment of the boundaries of the environmental conservation area doesn't indicate what my feeling is about what you want to do or your client wants to do. there's almost 13 acres. I mean, I'm including the Track 2 portion that Aubrey just mentioned. 13 acres of what will be commercial uses, plus whatever the acreage is of the existing C3 to the south. And I think that also there's something in the OKC plan that relates to commercial development should be on the corner of the property. That's the prefer. I think that's, isn't that right? Don't we have some indication that it's on the corners? What we try to avoid and have for the last several years on this commission is the continuation of strip shopping centers. And what you guys have is that. It goes right up Sooner Road, and here's a strip shopping center, parking here, with all sorts of uses. You can have, I mean, restaurants, convenience stores, medical services, food and beverage, retail sales, etc., just a quintessential strip shopping center. I don't think it's appropriate. I think that the C3 portion that's already there outside of the environmental conservation area that's on the corner for this area is sufficient to serve what you have surrounding it, other than the eastern portion of this residential, this RA. You have AA all around the whole place, and that little corner, the C3, whatever that acreage is, my opinion is adequate enough for commercial uses. And then what Aubrey just said about the potential environmental damage with parking lot runoff, the uses that you have here, restaurants, the grease, etc. I can't support this application and won't.
I will say that the C3 on the corner will differ from our tract. The commercial that we are anticipating is the rural commercial, which is a less intense
I
than
understand.
the C3.
It's still a strip shopping center because you have all the little pieces in it. There's a strip shopping center. Grocery stores, convenience stores, retail. I mean, go up May Avenue from the very beginning to the very end, and you see strip shopping centers that has destroyed whatever was there long, long ago, and it's just not appropriate in my opinion. They need to be the commercial needs to be on the corners and limited in rural areas, and that's my opinion about this one.
Is there city water in this subdivision?
Yes.
I thought there was.
In your mic.
But there's no sewer. Is that correct? Coming on.
That's correct. There's a public water line at the corner of Sooner and 149th Street that would be required to be extended north along Sooner to serve this property. There is no public sanitary sewer.
And Tim, you mentioned about concrete, about porous concrete. If this is zoned, and you are going to put some kind of a drainage filter, and if the city changes their ordinances to require that kind of concrete, would you go ahead and pave the parking if we go ahead and zone this with the porous concrete?
That's a tough question because it's if there's no well, currently the city's ordinance won't allow it.
Right.
That's the issue. So we couldn't do it unless it was permitted.
Okay.
I think it's a good alternative for an environmental protection area to provide pervious paving.
If in the future, are you going to develop this right now?
No,
I mean,
sir.
if in the future, would you, if the city would allow that, would you put the
I
porous?
think we would recommend to our client that we would put the language in there to allow for pervious paving if the city would permit it.
I've got a question of the staff again, Aubrey. When we did the subdivision, and I know I can't remember all the discussion, we eliminated a portion, the northeast corner of that, because of the conservation area. Why are we coming up now and saying that this is not acceptable?
I believe that the majority of the subdivision was in the environmental conservation area. And if my memory serves me right, I believe that the staff recommended against approving the subdivision and then negotiated extra TEs to protect on the drainage to make sure that it was captured and handled on the site. And I think those were negotiations that took place to allow this to go in the environmental conservation area. So this is kind of going back to allowing things in environmental conservation with certain mitigation measures against it. And, you know, we are seeing repeated cases that are trying to offset the impact of environmental conservation inside those areas. It was a little bit different to allow residential development versus allowing further commercial development to go up a heavily trafficked corridor. So for different reasons, we felt that that was not an appropriate land use to allow to keep continuing up further along from that commercial intersection for this case.
I might add, I was involved in the first case, Dennis Box, and I think what's important for you all to realize is there's going to be over 100 rooftops in that development, and that development will be developed appropriately. There will be protection provided. There was only one little niche at the northeast corner that the city ultimately was concerned about, and if you recall, you all required us to take that out of the plat. The city ended up acquiring that through condemnation processes. So when we look at what you're going to do on Sooner Road, I think it's hard to imagine that you'd have that as a playground, open field, grazing, or a 5-acre tract. And when you look at the traffic counts, I think the key is the use appropriate on Sooner Road? We feel it is, but more importantly, what was the driving force on the southeast sector plan? And that was protection, and Mr. Johnson has told you all how we will protect. I talked to our client. They will agree to what you wanted, Mr. Allen.
You know, when this plat was approved and we saw this strip here, it was pretty obvious what was going to happen. You know, even though, you know, the corner, I think, was the corner done at the same time as the plat, or was that separate?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know, trying to remember back, you know, when you do a development and you preserve a strip of land along an arterial street, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen, you know, even though that wasn't a request. And, you know, I really don't have a problem with this, and I'm going to recommend approval.
David, is this strip owned by the same property owner, or was it owned by the same property owner who developed the residential to the east, adjacent?
I'm probably the one to answer that. The individual that is now before you, Joe Glahn, owned the entire property, sold all of it off except for the property on Sooner Road. Was not involved in the development, platting, or any of that.
I have a question of the staff, and I guess a comment in response to Commissioner Allen's comment. I wonder why it is, given especially Commissioner Bright's observations, why it is that the staff is recommending approval or finds it appropriate to rezone the property along Sooner Road in this particular manner, with the exception of Tract 2. It seems to me that, yes, there's a strip of property there and something's going to happen and it's going to develop. That doesn't mean it has to have commercial uses on it, or at least not this kind of commercial use. You know, it might be appropriate for office use or for some lower intensity use. But I wonder, why is it that you're finding this appropriate for this area?
The The portion in Tract 1, because of the lower intensity and the limitation on the number of office and commercial uses that could go there, met the criteria in the Southeast Sector Plan for supporting rural residential development. And there were subdivisions in the proximity to the south and to the east that we felt that those types of services would be viable in this location. So that comprehensive plan policy fit that portion. And the reason that we recommended against allowing that to the north in Tract 2 was the concerns that we talked about before about expanding.
I get the Tract 2 part, but, I don't find these uses to be particularly low intensity.
The lower intensity portions were that they were allowed in rural residential zoning districts, and they were limited in the scale and the number because of the septic requirements and the amount of open space required. And they also put some things in their PUD about limiting access and drives. So it feels like those exceptions made it more of a rural character type of supporting office and commercial. And you all can comment about that too if you'd like.
Albert.
Okay, David, convince me.
The previous question of when the C3 tract was zoned, that was in 2002, so it's been about 8 years since that was zoned. When we looked at this, because of this area that it sits in, the straight commercial, like Mr. Bride had mentioned, May Avenue, we didn't feel that was appropriate. So the rural commercial, we felt, was less intense, and then, as Aubrey had said, the taking out a number of access points, and because of the amount of retention and other things we'll have to do on the northern tract, the amount that can be developed there is reduced. So the intensity is drawn back from even what we could do in the RC. With the traffic count and the volume down Sooner Road and the amount of rooftops that are now developed and continue to develop out in that area, we feel that the uses anticipated in the PUD are appropriate and will serve the area well.
So, can I ask Aubrey a question, please? Aubrey, can I ask you a question? I'd like to ask you a question concerning in the Southeast Sector Plan that was developed. Did I hear you say that within the sector plan there were commercial nodes identified, or nodes was identified for commercial development?
Yes, I think there were 3 locations.
Okay. And is this area one of those nodes?
No, it is not.
Thank you.
We do recognize that this isn't a node that was anticipated to be commercial development, but we do feel that the way that this area has developed, it's appropriate now because of the rooftops that are going on, and just because the sector plan had anticipated it not to be, we feel that the traffic count and the rooftops have made it an area that is appropriate. So, happy to answer any more questions.
I don't know what else we could expect.
Well, I do have a question. I understand, just a comment, if I could, Jimmy.
Okay.
The issue for me is whether we expected it or not. I didn't expect it because I wasn't here. So, is that we zoned, when we did the plat, a commercial area. Now, if you look, just as somewhat of a telling matter for me with respect to Commissioner Bright's comment, is we will now have a full quarter section of frontage that will be C3. Now, whether we expected it or not, I mean, the environmental concerns for the north tract, setting aside that particular tract, if you zone the subject property as we've discussed, in the way that it's proposed, you'll have, in addition to the C3 corner, which was contemplated, an additional tract that will extend the full quarter section length, which is how long? What is that, Jimmy? It's a long darn way. It's a long darn way. Effectively, that's half a mile.
It's half a mile.
It's half a mile of distance of commercial, whether it's rural intensity or otherwise. It is effectively, put it in perspective, half the distance between Portland and May, of a strip of commercial shopping center in an area that is particularly across the street, regardless of what we're talking about the rooftops, is AA. I think it kind of, I think that kind of goes against what I historically have thought our policy to be, is we have to keep that commercial development on the corner. I don't know how this ultimately develops. Maybe there's some other suggestion, but I don't really have a sense of what's going in this particular tract. Everybody says, well, the uses are less intensive, and perhaps the uses are less intensive, but I don't know what the amount of them is. I don't have an idea about what things are. Is it an office park? It says if it's developed as an office park, which tells me there may be the flip side of that. If it's not, it will be a strip center. I think that's too much along that strip, at least for me. So.
Well, if some sort of a low-intensity office use went into Tract 1, I wouldn't have a real problem with it, but having a half mile of commercial up there and not knowing what it's going to be is not something I would support.
I think that's kind of where we are. If your client would like to consider revisions to the PUD application to reduce the intensity of the uses along in Tract 1, I think that might be advisable.
I think was there a motion made?
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. Is there a second? Yeah. Well, I think we'll stand by the planning commissioner from the ward. We think he's right, and you all just have to vote your conscience.
Oh, I move to deny.
Second.
To deny.
Jim was, but Bob made a motion to deny. James seconded. We now have a motion on the floor to deny. Cast your vote.
Thank you.
Item 3 is ABC 722, an application by Abels for an ABC 1, a restaurant with limited alcohol district overlaying C3 Community Commercial District at 6901 South May Avenue in Ward 5.
Sir, if you'd give us your name and address for the record and pull the microphone down so we can hear you.
Yes, my name is Abel Ramos. And
Your address?
my address,
Address, yes.
for the purpose of the license,
That's fine. Just
6109 South May.
thank you. It's 6901, not 6109, right?
Yes, pardon me.
Okay. And you're looking for an ABC1 for your restaurant?
Yes, sir. Just Low Point beer to be served at the restaurant with the food.
Okay. Commissioners, no one has signed up.
I'll move approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 3. Cast your votes, and you're approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Item 4 is PC 10266, an application by Mike Ferracina to rezone 1500 Northwest 1st Street from R3 medium density residential to I1 light industrial, Ward 6.
Hi, my name is Marvin Theracina. This is my father, Mike Theracina. 616 Northwest 6.
Thank you.
We're applying for a rezoned area for I1 light industrial, which is currently R3. We plan to build a business office warehouse, which there are others like in the area. It's just going to be a 60 by 60 sheet metal siding, with some planning area is also, so it won't be such a huge eyesore.
Okay, no one has signed up, commissioners.
I just have a kind of an editorial comment about this area. There are, and I'll move approval of your application, but along Main Street, and this is, the development of Bricktown over here with the warehouses, et cetera. For years, went down General Pershing Drive on Main Street to downtown. It's just, and what's occurred on Main Street, there are several little offices and buildings and warehouses that have landscaping. There's really some attempt for the first time in memory to improve that area. And what I have always thought, that there are amenities there that at some point in time for this city, when the Devon Tower goes up and all the parks and everything, well, then all of a sudden, your property, it's West Main, it's over there, but your property and other properties, if you make it nice, it's going to be worth more.
Exactly.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I was actually raised in that area. I was actually born on, not born, but I was actually raised on First Street. I went to Willard, went for elementary school, and we've been there for such a long time.
In 1979.
Yeah, and we just want to kind of get back to the neighborhood because it seems like it's deteriorated over the years. So we kind of want to bring that prosperity back to the area.
That's really what we're agreeing to, because I've seen people that have properties there along Main and that area that really are trying to improve their properties and put landscaping in that recycling place. They put trees and stuff in front. So I thank you for your comments and for your interest in your neighborhood. Let's make it better.
Thank you.
Okay, good. I move to approve the application. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 4. Cast your votes, and you're approved.
Thank you.
Item 5 is PUD 1423, an application by Kenneth Haley to rezone 12301 Piedmont Road from AA District to PUD 1423, Ward 8.
I'm Randy Hill with E.D. Hill Surveying and Engineering, 510 Colcord Drive, and I represent KP Haley on this matter, and be happy to answer any of your questions. Or we agree with the technical evaluations.
Well, I guess we call this Valverde Light.
It's mainly single-family. We do have a couple of large ponds that we're planning on constructing there as you pull in development.
One concern or question in my mind, Randy, is there's a fair amount of commercial proposed now right out there around that intersection of Northwest Highway and Piedmont Road. And I think that's going to take a long time to evolve and develop, and I'm not sure that
actually our
commercial that is going to go up Piedmont Road is going to be an easy or practical thing to do. I think it would be hard enough to develop on the west side of Piedmont Road and Northwest Highway. I think my reaction is there's too much commercial there. I don't know how others feel, but
I might address that, and that is that it's really a very small amount of commercial. It may look like a lot on the map, but there's just 6 acres and 2 acres of commercial. It's a small in scale commercial. And as you may know, Piedmont Road is going to be as a part of a state highway project. It's in the 8-year plan. It's actually going to be improved as a state highway there in that location. And we've got industrial that's going to be happening across the street in the Village Verde addition, just right here. So I think it's probably a good step down, and our idea is to step down to the commercial and then to the pond and our residential there.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
The traffic impact study in the staff report says it's, for this PUD will be submitted with the first plat. I think we've asked this question before. Why isn't the traffic impact study submitted with this application?
Well, we've agreed to do it with the first plat, so that if they have any requirements that they want to make of us, so that we would...
But you see my point, is that we're considering rezoning this from agricultural use only to a PUD that has, what did you say, 6 acres of C3 and I don't know how many R1 residential units you're going to have, but nevertheless, 122nd and on the, I don't know what's 122nd, is that a 2-lane street there?
Yes, sir.
And then you've got Piedmont Road, which is State Highway 4. But on Piedmont, on 122nd, that's when, why don't we have the traffic impact study so we can decide with our eyes open whether or not what you propose to do with the commercial and the residential will not impact what's out there, will not be a traffic hazard, will, whatever requirements you have for, my question is, why don't we have that before we vote on something like this? Instead of we approve it and we say, okay, it's from AA to C3, R1, and all of a sudden 122nd is a 2-lane blacktop road with potholes, and your people can't get in and out, the other people can't, it's just chaos. I think there should be in front of us traffic management saying yes, no, or we have these problems so that we can make a, kind of a reasoned decision.
I might say that the Village Verde, which is a substantially much larger development back to the east, did do a traffic study on their property. And it was not determined to make additional requirements of improving that road on them. And they actually have a school they're going to be constructing and a lot of things that are real traffic generators, where we're just talking about some single family with a little bit of commercial in the corner that this is going to be. But we did agree to do a traffic study, and if there was some kind of traffic improvements that would be required at the time we develop, we'll have to put them in, and we'll have to address them at that point. But to make us do it at this point, I think, is a little premature.
James?
So can we do a conditional approval of this plat subject to the conditions of the traffic study?
Yes.
Okay. I think once we get to the final stage, it's already set the precedent in the preliminary stage, and once we get to the final, it's kind of like, well, it was approved in the preliminary, so the final kind of goes. So if we could condition it subject to the traffic study.
I think Bob raises an important point, though, which is the cart and the horse, because once you've zoned it and you do a traffic study, if it turns out the traffic study suggests that there's a deficiency, you're trying to fix problems rather than having something
well, that's
inappropriate.
Right. Once it's zoned, then you're just talking about the configuration of it. It's already... I think this is something maybe, I don't know whether we're going to make Randy Hill pay for this particular problem here today, but, this is one of those catch-22s that it seems like we've kind of created for ourselves. And it would be a good thing, I think, for us to hear from the development community and also for our own staff about this. I mean, obviously, there's a limit to how much money a developer can lay out up front just without even knowing he's going to be able to do something. To provide something like a full-blown traffic study, I mean, it's an expensive thing. But at the same time, once we've got the zoning in place, we're just talking about how we're going to lay it out. And that doesn't make any sense with respect to things like traffic. We've got to know whether there's impact or not, and if so, how to address it. So, I think this is an issue that we need to look at.
Well, it comes back fundamentally again to infrastructure first or development first. I mean, should we have the infrastructure in place so that Randy, this isn't your deal specifically at the moment, but I mean, we've had a case recently where infrastructure was a serious concern to us, and people who live in that area already are having a great deal of trouble getting out and about and around, commuting, getting out in the morning, home at night, and so forth. And then we're adding in the application another several hundred, 400 homes, for example. put those people in there, and all we're doing is creating a quality of life problem for them before they ever get there. And we haven't come to a solution for that, but I think we need to as a city.
The question, though, I guess, is sort of where you draw that line. We approve the developments and approve the zoning, and then it's a problem not only for those people, but for the people who come next. And so it just becomes, sort of a race to get there first. That doesn't make any sense either.
We really don't have a mechanism to require a traffic impact study up front, but you did just recently approve the requirement for a traffic impact analysis, and those will be coming in up front with the zoning applications, and you'll see those at the same time you review the zoning.
You're saying, J.J., that as far as this application, you didn't have the mechanism.
Right. We're trying to put it in place now. We're trying to.
But we do now.
Notify the development community. We're very close. We've got to get the developers notified of what's required, and that it does have to be submitted up front. We did that a few months back.
Because it's the staff report that said a traffic impact study is required. Okay? So we're to approve this and say, well, we're going to do that with the first plat. Now, Janice, it's exactly what we shouldn't be doing. And so I think that James's suggestion, a conditional approval with however you want to word it, I think that's a good suggestion to get you going.
And we've got several stages we're going through here. This is the zoning stage. The next stage will be the preliminary plat. The Village Verde addition that you recently approved next door, they did both stages together. And maybe...
But you understand, though, that what my understanding of the conditional approval is if the traffic impact study says this one will not work, then you don't do it.
Well, typically what they would say was what's required. If you're creating a traffic problem, then a DXL lane or something like that might be required.
And you may not be able to do it.
But it was not required on the one to the east, by the way. At this location, in this area.
I'm okay with it.
Randy, how much of your, what is the total development acres? I'm sorry, I know it's here on my plat. But it's 53 acres, right?
It's 50 acres, uh-huh.
And how much of that is represented by your commercial? What's your commercial tract?
Well, the commercial is just, like I said, 6 acres here and 2 acres here.
So 8 acres is of the total 53?
And then we've got about that same amount in open spaces.
Well, it's closer to 9 or 10 acres, because you've got 2 acres in Tract C, 7 acres in Tract A. Tract B is 2.5 almost.
Yeah, and we've got about 7 acres of lake open space area adjoining it here.
So how many residential lots do you propose?
It's not sure right now until we actually do the layout. I mean, I've done a conceptual here, but we haven't actually laid it out. It'll be a large lot, single-family development.
Okay, are you Margaret Owens? We'll get to you in just a second if you're patient with us. Randy, there's one thing in your language that I think we need to clear up. Section 853, it talks about lots not required to have frontage on approved streets. I think you probably mean that for the commercial tracts, but the way it's written, it could be for residential as well, I think, unless I'm missing something. Just want to make sure residential lots will front on a street.
Yes, they will.
Yeah. Yeah. It just doesn't say that. Okay, Margaret, let's hear from you. If you'll give us your name and address, please.
My name is Margaret Owens. My current address is 8316 Northwest 115th. I'm here because we got a notification of this, and we are currently completing basically $1 million 18-acre home farm site right down Cottontail Road, which is within 100 yards of this. I don't know if you're aware of this, but 122nd is a gravel road there. I don't know if anybody's told you that. On the west side of Piedmont Road, it's gravel all the way over to Cemetery. there's a stop sign at 122nd right now, and traffic goes down Highway 4 or Piedmont Road like crazy, and you have to be extremely careful just to get across that road. I don't know what the plans are here, but in the winter last year when we had our snowstorm, you could not get through 122nd Street. You could not. The snow drifted so deep that you had to drive completely around to Northwest Expressway and around to Cemetery Road and come up that way just to get into our property. Our concern is that, as I said, we've got $1 million property here. I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade, but if he's going to put $90,000 houses here, I got a problem with that. And if he's going to cram them together, you know.
Well, our issue for clarity is land use and not value of homes or sizes of homes. If he has the zoning, he can build
whatever he wants.
Well, whatever the zoning permits, not whatever he wants, but whatever the zoning permits. But we can't tell someone that they can't build one size house next to another.
Well, okay, I understand that. Our thought is that all of the land out there is being used agriculturally to speak of, or homes on large 5, 10 or more acres on the west side of Piedmont Road. And if he's going to put a housing addition in there with a lot of commercial, again, I agree with you, the traffic could be a problem. But we're looking for some sort of stipulation as to home size or building materials, and I understand you can't do that, but I talked with my neighbors out there, and none of them even got a notice that this was happening. As far as I know, we're the only ones that got one, because those are all large pieces of property out there. And we just felt like we needed to come in and say this, that as I said, that's a gravel road out there. That's not designed for putting in homes or anything else right this moment. So that's all I needed to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob? Mr. Chairman, I have probably another comment. I think that I asked if the 122nd was two-lane. I had assumed that it was like hard surface. I didn't know it was gravel. The other thing that I just reminded myself was on the number of uses that you have, or you're allowing on tracks A and B, you have gasoline sales, large, commercial lodging, drive-through restaurants, order windows. You have the litany of every C3 use that is intensive on traffic, etc. And a traffic impact study, here's my theory. If you have this development you don't know how many lots you're going to have. Even though you've drawn them out, you probably can count them. You don't know how many lots. You've got 8 acres, 9 acres of commercial with big gasoline sales, hotels, drive-through restaurants, etc. And you've got a gravel road. This is back to traffic. Traffic impact studies have to take into account the condition of the road upon which this development abuts. With a gravel road and with no indication from you or anybody else that there's a bond issue that's going to pave that thing, it's going to make it anything more than a gravel road from Piedmont Road on west, I don't see how a traffic impact study is going to say that this is suitable at all. You would say, no, you can't do that. You know, it can't be done. There's too much here. So too many uses, too many uncertainties about where this is. The AA, I would prefer that we perhaps continue this and you do get a traffic impact study, you do consider reducing down the number of uses on your commercial side, you do have an idea, a pretty clear idea, how many residential lots that there are going to be, and where the ingress-egress is going to be off of Piedmont Road or 122nd, and then I can go forward. I can't go forward on this basis. Even what James has said, I can't really go forward on it. I'd want to continue it.
And we have no problem continuing it, and I'd be happy to look at those uses. The size of the commercial, also doesn't dictate a lot of those uses that you mentioned. We had agreed with all the uses the staff had asked us to restrict, and we did. As far as the access is concerned, we have shown where our accesses are going to be, and we've limited them as a part of the PUD. And if you are going to decide that this property probably needs a traffic impact statement, then you probably need to decide that all applications need traffic impact statements, because this is single-family residential.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, and maybe that's what you want to do.
But only when it abuts a gravel road. That's when every time you would have to have that.
Okay.
Well, JJ's indicated that we're very close to doing exactly that, which is...
Yeah.
But I think Commissioner Bright's right. I mean, looking at uses along Northwest Highway is very different from 122nd Street and Piedmont Road in terms of the range of uses, the scale of uses, and so forth. So I would agree. I'd urge a continuance and some refinement of this proposal.
We'll agree to a 30-day continuance, and then in the meantime, refine some of those things and take a look at.
Perfect. Yes.
Well, we're either November 18th, which is our one meeting in November, or what's our December meeting? Do we know the date? December 9th.
Okay. We'll go to that December 9th meeting.
Maybe continue December 9th.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to continue item 5 to December 9th. Cast your votes. And your continued.
Thank you very much.
Item 6 is SPUD 586, which is an application by Cornerstone Bank to rezone 8500 North May from PUD 199 to SPUD 586, Ward 8.
My name's Dennis Fox. I'm here with Tim Johnson and Randy Barrett, who is one of the owners of Cornerstone Bank, has made an application, and they, if you have had an opportunity to look in your staff report, they plan on placing a banking facility at this location. To give you a little bit of history, we've met with the neighborhood both to the east and to the west. The present zoning would allow for high-density residential, and you might imagine that the neighbors were excited to see the use that we're talking about, office use, banking use. The issues that came up started with our access plan. Originally, and in the present zoning that you all have in front of you, we had access proposed to Drakestone, and we got a resounding no from the group that was at the meeting. Subsequent to that, we went out and actually talked to a number of the neighbors within the area, some of which said they liked the idea, so we left it in until we were able to make a few phone calls of ourselves. And so today I'm proposing that we take out the access onto Drakestone that is shown on the site plan. The next issue that came up was the question about signage. And you all will find this interesting, that several people at the neighborhood meeting liked our sign and even thought that maybe a taller sign would be appropriate. They happen to be people that were in the commercial real estate field, but be that as it may, they still had that feeling. So what I've handed out today really correlates more with what this commission has wanted over the last few years, and that is a smaller sign, and that kind of goes to the technical evaluations And when we deal with technical evaluations, that would be number 4, which we can agree to on the size. We do. This says EMD sign shall not be permitted. We would like to, as that sign shows, be able to have one on the scale and be able to, show time, temperature, rates, that kind of thing. And that's what you see on the sign that's proposed in front of you.
Are you proposing that operating at level 1?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Refresh my memory. Level 1 is what? I mean, is that, what is it, 8 seconds?
Every 8 seconds.
And limited hours?
Yes. I forget what the hours are. Level 2 has that same restriction. The reason they're prohibited here is because of their proximity to residential.
You're within 150 feet of residential to the west and to the north, it would appear. Is that right?
Yes, we've got a home that's to the north, several homes. We have homes to the east, and then, of course, we've got a residential subdivision back to the west. So, as shown on the site plan, we think as long as we make it 8 feet and live with the scale 1, we think that's appropriate.
Are the NIFs governed in level 1?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you have a certain limitation that you can't exceed, and you guys would know all those rules, right?
I wouldn't, but a sign person would. We're agreeing to them.
But for clarity, if we were to grant this, it would be, in essence, a variance to our EMD sign ordinance.
Right. It would have to be a variance because we spent a lot of time discussing this. And the use of yes.
Yes. Yeah, they want to permit, under the EMD sign ordinance, they're not permitted at all within...
Correct.
Yeah.
When you say, don't I get a vote? Okay. All right.
You just get one vote, Dennis.
Yeah,
We'll give you one vote.
All I ask for is one vote. But we have worked, and as late as today, I was on the telephone with both representatives of the neighborhood to the east and to the west, and they're thankful that we've taken out the access on Drakestone. There was some discussion at the meeting, and this is the second time this has come up within the last year and a half, about installing a left turn lane, which would just be put just at this location. And we've coordinated with your staff. On the previous case that I dealt with it on, it was before the Board of Adjustment. I'm sure Mr. Allen remembers it, but it dealt with the same neighborhood group back to the west, and the final result was it was not recommended that a left turn lane be placed. In fact, safety reasons would dictate that if you're going to put a left turn lane in, you should do it for like an entire mile, not just put it at specific locations. So,
does the right-of-way exist to do that? Does the right-of-way exist to do that?
Whether it exists or not, we'll have to give the 17 feet, as part of our zoning. In fact, I think the 17 feet was given when the PUD was done. So it could probably be done, Mr. Chairman, but from a safety standpoint...
Yeah, that stretch of May Avenue, that would be awkward.
Yeah, we don't think it's a good idea. Your staff doesn't, and Mr. Johnson's here as the expert, so I'm going to let him speak to that. But we think this is a good use at this location. The one thing I consistently heard from everyone, whether it was at the neighborhood meeting or on calls, was they liked the idea of a bank being there. We propose a bank, and we think it's a good idea. With regard to this proposal, we might, if you would, take just a minute on page 7 on your technical evaluations. We can agree to 1, 2, and 3. My client believes that a solid PVC type fence would be better than some kind of wooden fence with columns, and so we think that would be a better quality, and we'd like to add that into the types of fencing that could be put on. We've already talked about 4, and I know where Mr. Bright stands on number 4, but we agree to all of the sign regulations, less than except we would like to be able to have the ability to have signage that you see in this day and time that will tell what a CD rate is and what the time is and what the temperature is. So,
well, we've got public service sign. Is that what you're proposing to do?
I think public service was well put.
I understand.
I could have put it.
We have 2 people signed up, Dennis, so whenever you're ready.
I'm hurrying. With regard to number 5, there isn't a 200-foot separation. The site plan that you see is a site plan showing 3 actual curb cuts, and we've agreed to take the Drakestone curb cut off, and I'm going to let Mr. Johnson tell you why the curb cuts at this location we think are appropriate, and we can agree to 6 and 7. So, Mr. Chairman, do you want to hear from Mr. Johnson first or the neighbors that have signed up?
We'll let Mr. Johnson speak and finish your presentation, then we'll hear from the neighbors.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again, Tim Johnson. I'll try to be brief. The issue that we've talked about before before the Board of Adjustment that Dennis was referring to was another site further south on Elmhurst, but the same condition exists here. Drakestone comes in, it's offset from the opposing Cornwell and Drakestone Avenue on the west side of May. You can see that the neighborhood, the Lakehurst neighborhood that abuts May Avenue to the west on May Avenue has 12 openings, has 12 points of access, and has 2 additional accesses on the south on Wilshire Boulevard. So the neighborhood has a lot of options to be able to move. With regard to the spacing of the driveway and the number of driveways, you can see best on that map that we have chosen to line up our main access with the opposing street, because if you don't line them up, you need to separate them at a length that would conflict with both Drakestone, and these blocks are so narrow that would conflict with the next street south should we have owned the property. So we want to line up with Cornwall. We did do a traffic impact study and noted that the impact to May Avenue was almost negligible, 0.3 of a second. The impact to Cornwall by lining that driveway up did reduce its functionality slightly during PM traffic, but it already functioned at an E level and dropped by 0.7 of a second to an F level. So there's not much, it's almost negligible. The second driveway to the south, as shown on the site plan, is placed such that it's mid-block. If we go further south, we're closer to Winton, I think it is, the street to the south. If we go further close, we're even closer than, I think we're right now, that plan shows it 160 feet. I know the 200 feet is the policy, but with the circulation patterns in the bank and with the drive-through, the need for 2 driveways is important. They have service vehicles, trash, and things like that need to be able to circulate the site better than just with 1 driveway.
Okay, thank you. James, go ahead. Question?
Tim, what is the separation distance?
About 160 feet.
How many?
160.
160 opposed to 200, okay.
Yes, sir.
Janie Axton? You were signed up.
Yes, thank you.
Give us your name and address, please.
Janie Axton, 2628 Elmhurst, Oklahoma City. I am president of the Nichols Hills Suburban Neighborhood Association. We're the large neighborhood to the east of this development. The consensus of our neighborhood association is, as Mr. Bach said, pleased that a bank is going to be in this proposed location. We think it's a good use of the land. And we've also been pleased that they have been considerate of some of our concerns. For instance, the entrance and exit onto Drakestone that you see up there has been eliminated. We've been concerned about encouraging traffic through our neighborhood that is very residential and also is the home to 2 schools. We also appreciate the fact that the signage is low along May Avenue, the 8-foot, particularly with Lakehurst, and you can see all the residential area there and the homes that will back up to this proposed new bank. There are some details of the proposed development we don't yet see finalized that still has our concerns. One of them has to do with drainage or water detention and the potential flooding of neighbors' yards or even their homes. We're also concerned about the type of fence that's been possibly specified for the east side of the property. We were looking for maybe a more noise buffeting kind of fence. But until we see details, more firm details of this development, at this point we do not object to the use of it for Cornerstone Bank. Thank you.
Did you hear Mr. Box say that they propose a PVC fence for the east part of their property?
Right. It's my understanding that a masonry fence is actually more of a sound buffeter, but I would have to get more expert opinion on that. The PVC to me is just a plastic fence. Is that correct?
Dennis, that's accurate,
It's a plastic
isn't it?
fence.
That's what it says to me, but...
Yeah, it looks plastic, but there are different ways to deal. There are different ways to deal.
It looks plastic, and it is?
And it is plastic.
There are different ways to deal with the sound. I mean, we don't want to be tied to putting a brick wall up, but we have no problem making sure that we'll comply with everything the staff has said are options, with adding the PVC option, and we don't mind adding trees on that.
That would help too. Shrubs and trees.
What are you're a bank, so your hours of operation are 7 to 7?
Let's get the banker up here.
Get the banker
Randy?
up here.
Randy Merrick, Cornerstone Bank. Yes, sir, roughly 7 to 7.
And then your Saturday is 7
9
to
to
10.
noon, roughly.
And your drive-through, you're having a drive-through, right?
Yes, sir.
How many lanes you proposing?
I believe there's 4 in this one.
It's not like a speaker drive-through, right?
Excuse me?
You know, it's not like a...
Bank drive-through
Banks
speakers
usually
are
aren't
not...
too noisy. I mean, the residential concern was with respect to noise, so that's addressed.
I see.
Yeah.
Mr. Box asked me to comment a little bit about our bank. We're a small community bank out of Watauga originally. We're not a large bank. My family owns control. There's not a tremendous amount of traffic generated with our bank with the current size we have. We just built a bank in Mustang 2 years ago. Traffic count's very small, and the noise is minimal. So just a little background on the bank itself.
Are your drive-through hours different from your lobby hours?
They are. The lobby currently in Mustang isn't open on Saturdays, but different markets require different things, and I haven't determined exactly what the hours will be at this one yet.
But your drive-through hours are 7 to 7, and your lobby hours are within that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to find out.
I really agree with you. I don't think the noise, I'm not sure that that neighborhood is ever going to be affected by noise from your bank. And I really do support your bank going there. I mean, all this has to do with the aesthetics of this wall, that the people that live in what we used to call West Nichols Hills, my son lives just a little bit over there. I go on Drakestone, I go on Elmhurst, I go on to get into that part. And the aesthetics of it, you've got a very nice building with an assisted living center that's just been built to the south. And when Dennis said the fence looks like plastic, I think that's what he said. Can't you do a nicer fence? Just because all of this is being gentrified, and your bank is going to be a really important part of that whole area, both Lakehurst, West Nichols Hills, etc. And I don't think the plastic fence really fits in with what they're trying to do with that entire neighborhood.
Bacchus Payne is our architect.
Well,
and
the TE said, brick columns with, a wall. But, I'm not concerned at all about the noise. I'm concerned about the appearance of it. When you said it's going to look like a plastic fence.
But the TEC, when you look at the technical evaluation, a wall with bricks is an option, but we could also do
wood with column.
Yeah. And our thought was, wood after a few years deteriorates, and when you deal with this material, it doesn't deteriorate. So that's why we thought this might be an option. But if the commission thinks that that's a bad apple.
Well, I don't want it to look like you've done aluminum siding fence. You know what I mean.
Well, that's my concern. We're putting a lot of money for our size organization into this. It's a very nice facility, and after the HOA meeting, I talked to Dennis and Tim and said, well, I would prefer to have a fence that is representative of the community and the kind of establishment that we're trying to build here. So I want it to be aesthetically pleasing, and the vision you may have of a plastic fence isn't really what I have in mind. We want masonry columns periodically and a nice fence in between, but not necessarily have to go to the expense of masonry. But I can assure you I want it to look good because, this is my bank, and this is the kind of vision we want people to have for us. So we want it to be nice.
Well, because you're going to have a nice bank,
right.
And neighbors will like that. And if you have a chain link fence with plastic going through the things, that's not what.
No, that's what I have at my house. No.
Okay.
It's my desire to have a nice fence.
All right.
But
thank you.
The only piece of this I have a problem with is the variance from our policy on the signage. After the wars on the signs, I'm not inclined to start varying our requirements at this point. So.
Let me add to that, Janice. We did have a resolution of policy adopted 9-0 on the Planning Commission that there weren't going to be any EMD signs except in Bricktown, downtown, with special permits, and so then that was not agreed to by City Council. And for months, I think staff will agree, months, they worked on the EMD sign ordinances, and really, these are the rules. And the rule is you have one with 150. I didn't realize this, Russell, that this would take a variance. But as much as our vision of what should be was denied by council, that council put these provisions in, and staff worked very, very hard. I, for the life of me, can't imagine voting in favor of an EMD sign within 150 feet of a residential area where it doesn't really belong. So that's my...
I'm still bloody from those discussions, but that's... I say I'm still bloodied from those EMD discussions.
Yeah, I agree that this is a little bit different than what we were thinking about when we made those rules. I mean, this is, May Avenue after all, but it is within, 100 feet of an existing residence that's there on May. And I suppose if it were at some point in the future to cease being there, it is just the one house, isn't it, that we're talking about? That would be the 150 or not?
Across the street.
Across the street.
Across the street.
That was the main point of that limitation.
Yeah, I can't go for that.
Because you do not want to be looking across the road at them.
It's on the west side of the street.
And the north. And
I'm sorry, Dennis, I'm not reading. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Diane Ferguson was signed up as well. My apologies. Thank you. Diane, I apologize. The note's here, and I just set it aside for a moment. If you give us your name and address, please.
I'm Diane Ferguson.
Can you pull the microphone down so we can hear you? Thank you.
I'm Diane Ferguson. I live at 2933 Cornwall Place. I live in Lakehurst, which is to the west of the site to be developed for the bank. We're very pleased with the bank. We realize that there's a lot of vacant property to be developed along May Avenue, and we find the bank to be a low-impact usage for that piece of property. And the president of the bank has been very gracious to meet with the homeowners associations and try and work out all the differences that exist. Our concern is that we are not in favor. There are two entrances on May Avenue. There's one directly across from Cornwall and one to the south. We are not in favor of the entrance directly across from Cornwall. And my question is this: considering the frontage size of the property on May Avenue, is it a requirement that there be two entrances? Or is it possible to move the entrance that's directly across from Cornwall to the site of the south entrance and make that south entrance larger? And I don't know the correct terminology, but possibly have there be a median in between the south lane and the north lane. That would clearly delineate turn in here, exit here. I don't think that would change the traffic flow of the bank, putting that entrance there and making it bigger. I asked today, considering the size of the total piece of property from Drakestone to Elmhurst, wouldn't it have been good to have that whole piece of property lined out to start with? And there was one owner of the property, and then the bank, I guess, entered into negotiation for their parcel. And I was told that at the time the bank entered into negotiation with the landowner, that that was not something that was either discussed or thought about or whatever, but they said at this point in time that's not particularly an option. So that is our concern, along with the fact that there is no turning lane being established, and I understand why that's not happening. It's ill-advised to put a little section of turning lane along May Avenue. I think possibly in the future, as the rest of that property develops out, it would be nice to have a turn lane that runs. There's a turn lane to the north and then run from Wilshire to that existing turn lane. That would be very nice to have, but that's not now. So that is our one concern. And as for the sign, to the north of that piece of property, there's St. Martin's and also a surgical or medical center of some sort or another. And they have what I would call a monument sign. Now, I don't know what the correct terminology is for that, but it seems to be very attractive and not abrasive or anyway to a neighborhood. So those are my two concerns with this.
Traffic engineers will tell you that offsetting intersections are much safer, or direct intersections are much safer than offsetting. Mr. Johnson can explain it better than I, but if we were to offset this, we'd create a more dangerous situation than if Cornwall and their entrance were opposite each other, because motorists looking across are aware of each other, and so it's a safer.
I understand that until you have somebody coming south and somebody coming north, and they want to turn, one wants to turn into the street and the other wants to turn into the bank, then you've got two cars front to front.
That happens at every intersection in the city.
Yeah. And so you're trying to look across two lanes of traffic, and then you've got the people coming from behind at 40 miles an hour or whatever, swerving over because they see the brake lights to get on around it. So as far as safety, I guess there have been a lot of studies done, but I don't know.
Thank you.
Against my client's advice, my client believes that the sign ordinance has merit and will agree to it.
We thank your client for making that an easy vote for us.
Then, with that, I move approval of the application with the revision of GE 3. What is it? I mean, whatever you're going to do with the fence, with allowing a PVC fence
As an option.
As an option, is that?
We'll still have the columns. We'll still have everything else.
But there'll be brick columns between this.
On 24-foot centers and some trees and so forth. So we'll.
Yes, sir.
And we're eliminating the curb cut on Drakestone.
Yes. Yes. Right.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second as conditioned on item 6. Cast your vote for approval, and you're approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item 7 has been continued till November the 18th. Item 8 is V6 5725, which is an application by Scott A. Keeney requesting a variance to Section 4.6 of the Oklahoma City subdivision regs relating to issuance of a certificate of occupancy on property at 8717 Northwest 157th Place, Ward 8.
Commissioners, we've seen this before. Somebody needs to get into their home.
I'll move approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 8. Cast your votes, and item 8 is approved.
Item 9 is SPUD 552, an application by OnQ Marketing to rezone 6200 Northwest Expressway from R1 Single Family to SPUD in Ward 1. 552, sorry?
Now or after? All right. We're going to take about a 10-minute break for Mr. Allen. We'll be back shortly.
All right.
We are back in session. Russell?
To reiterate, item 9, which is SPUD 552, application by OnQ. David?
Good afternoon. David Box on behalf of the applicant, 522 Colcord Drive. Also with me today is Mohammed Khan, Dennis Silvers, Steve Hoffner, and Jim Griffith. This is our, I think, second time to actually be before this commission and put on our presentation. By now, everyone knows the facts and what all is involved here, so I will give the commission an update from the last time that we met. Since that time, it has been determined that a traffic signal at the intersection of Wilshire and Brookside is going to go in, and with that, my client is going to pick up the cost for the engineering fees that went into that, as well as we are currently entering into an agreement with the city to help in the cost to install that light. After the decision to install the light was made, we had a subsequent meeting with a group of neighbors, and at that meeting, they seemed, at least that group, seemed to be happy with the decision that the light was going in, and at least some of their fears were put to bed with that. I think it's important to focus on what it is that we are actually applying for. What we're talking about is merely 0.46 acres of rezoning, where currently 2/3 or 3/4 of the site is already zoned C3 and could be developed with every use that C3 would allow. And all we're trying to do is get a small portion of this entire triangle rezoned to allow a service station. Now, traffic is obviously the issue here, and I'm going to let Steve Hoffner get up and talk and explain the measures that we've gone to and what the traffic signal should do. Before that, I do want to go through the TEs real quick. TE number 1, 2, and 3, we are fine with. TE number 4, we are not fine with. We would ask that we're allowed a 20-foot monument sign with the C3 display area, and that to be at level 2 display. TE number 5, we're also not okay with. What we would ask, and what Mr. Hoffner is going to speak to, is that we think that 2 drives on Northwest Highway would be beneficial. TE 6, 7, 8, and 9 we are okay with. And with that, I will let, unless there's any questions of me, I'll let Mr. Hoffner.
David, let's go back to TE 5 for a minute.
Yes.
You said 2 access points on Northwest Highway?
Our plan that has been submitted has 2 different access points off of Northwest Highway.
But not on this point, 46 acres.
Correct. There's only one on the SPUD that is presented to you, and there is another one that's on the C3 that's already there. But
So for your Northwest Highway frontage, there would be...
For this SPUD, 1.
But for your entire tract, which includes this and the C3 land, you would have 2?
What is proposed in our site plan is 2, yes.
Oh, that's my question.
Okay, yes.
The answer is yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just one thing further. Given the application by a representative of your firm moments ago with respect to the variance of the sign discussion, perhaps while others are speaking, you might take that off with your client so that we reflect more accurately the feelings of the sentiments of the commission, which were expressed mere moments ago.
Well,
just a suggestion.
I would submit that May Avenue at whatever cross street that was is a very different intersection than here, and so the concerns and things that apply there I don't think would apply here. I will have that conversation while others are speaking.
Just a thought.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Hoffner with Traffic Engineering Consultants, 6000 Southwestern here in Oklahoma City. Just wanted to give you a brief background with regards to this project. We did an initial traffic study for the development as proposed. The development traffic study encompassed the entire tract of land, not just the SPUD that is being submitted today for approval. And when we did that study, it's a convenience store and a gas station type operation. We find that about 60 to 70% of the traffic that goes to a location like this is already on the roadway system. They'll still go in and out of the driveway, so you have that volume of traffic entering and exiting the site itself, but it's not really generating a substantial amount of additional traffic. And it can change a little bit in terms of the direction of travel as they enter and then exit going in the same direction, going home or going to work. After we conducted the traffic study, we found that the site as proposed met all the requirements. It was within acceptable levels in terms of the driveway, access points, and the overall site itself, the capacity analysis. However, in the first neighborhood meeting that we had, we very quickly found that there was substantial issue with regards to the neighborhood, especially to the south, in particular dealing with the Brookside intersection and Wilshire Boulevard. In discussions with the neighborhood, they're very concerned. Construction was already underway to 4-lane Wilshire from Northwest Highway a mile to the west to Rockwell Avenue. And the intersection, which has been an issue for a number of years of Brookside and Wilshire, was still an unresolved issue. I was authorized to go back, look at different alternatives. I believe that some of those alternatives are actually in your staff report. We looked at a number of things to solve the issue there, and there are a couple of different options that would actually work. If you'll remember, the existing intersection has a stop sign for one direction of travel, and when it gets out to widen to a 4 to 5 lane section in there, the stop sign is probably not a viable alternative. But we analyzed all the different alternatives. We modeled them with graphics and animation program, and then we had I met with staff. The staff reviewed that, and has ultimately decided to have an additional neighborhood meeting, visit with all the neighbors, present the alternatives, and have an open and honest discussion as to what would be the best alternative out there. As a result of that meeting, city staff and myself attended that meeting. It was determined that the best solution would be to signalize the Brookside and Wilshire intersection to provide the access necessary to the neighborhood to the south. The neighborhood really is very limited in their access points. One has been closed. Their access to the south is a single point of access that winds through the city of War Acres, so this is really their only opportunity or main opportunity for access to the neighborhood. As my understanding and follow-up of that meeting, the design engineer for the Wilshire project is currently revising plans, and through a field change, I believe that traffic signal is going to be installed at that intersection. I've been in conversation with them with regards to how we looked at it from an alternative standpoint. David, just a little clarification, the engineering costs were my time in meeting with the neighborhood and looking at the different alternatives for the city and such. The actual additional design cost beyond what I did will actually be with the consulting engineer that's currently working on the project, which is Benham. And then our client has also agreed to pay for a portion of that traffic signal if this item is approved, and because of their impact on the site itself. In summary, the site and the driveways that are being proposed, there's 2 to Wilshire. The spacing on them is adequate. The closest one to the Brookside intersection, unfortunately, we were able to move it back. And then 2 additional driveways are being proposed on Northwest Highway. Because the median on Northwest Highway, those driveways are in and out. I asked, and the client agreed to put in right turn lanes for those 2 driveways. I believe the TE evaluation, or the TE that's being requested, would be the elimination of one of those driveways on Northwest Highway. From a traffic perspective, if you have 2 driveways, you spread the traffic out amongst those 2 driveways, and each one has a lesser impact on the roadway system itself. Obviously, a reduction in driveways concentrates the traffic, but it also reduces conflict points. The preference would be to have the 2 driveways on Northwest Highway, and I'll just leave it at that. So from a traffic impact point, just to reemphasize, it meets all the minimum requirements that are necessary. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
If I could you indicate for us where your drives are back out onto Wilshire? I know, and when I speak of the site, for the purpose of this meeting, I think it would be helpful. We understand the subject site that we're being asked to prove is merely this segment of R1 that's indicated on the map. I think it would be helpful when we speak of the site if we could talk of the overall plan for all.
Hopefully this is it.
I think that's how we think of the project, and that would be helpful for everybody, I think. Thanks.
I would agree with you. It's hard to separate the 2 out. The crosshatch area, just for clarification purposes, is the subject matter before us, but the entire site, the Brookside intersection is at this location. I believe the spacing back to the first driveway is 150 to 195 feet, almost 200 feet to the separation between this driveway and what will be the signalized intersection. And then the one further back is even a considerable distance further to the west. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Will there be decel lanes on Northwest Expressway?
Yes, whatever driveways are approved there. Yes, this drawing does not reflect that, but we are agreeable to put those in.
I have a question about your traffic study, and appreciate all the work that you've done and you're doing. But just logically, that my understanding is that this facility will, at any given time, park 18 cars to fill up with gas. It's that extensive a facility. It's not a 4-pump gas station. It's an 18-car or truck facility that's there. On the Northwest Expressway, well, and the other factor is that with all of the information I have in the staff report about how good OnQ is in putting together a quality facility, well-lit, safe, etc., for all the people that come there, it will be an attractive place. So the people coming on the Northwest Expressway from the east to the west, the only way they're going to get in there is turning left on Wilshire and going through. And you have this really nice facility, well-lit, 18 car or however many gas pumps you have, that's 18 of them, coming in from the east down that goes right by the Brookside exit, right through the one entrance there. Then you have, if you have one entrance, and you're advocating two, but one coming from the west to the east, same thing. These people that come in there, they come in one place, and if they come around and they're on the south side of those pumps, they're going to go out on Wilshire. To go out, and then they'll go out to the Northwest Expressway. It's illogical to assume that they're not going to do that. My question is, your traffic impact study and the people that have attended these meetings, residents, as I understand there's about 1,000 of them to the south, they have been grateful that the city has agreed to a traffic signal at Wilshire and Brookside. But then I get these emails, all these other factors that are on Wilshire, that my question is, does the traffic impact study also anticipate the facility that you've got to imagine things, a great facility, well done, attractive to all, traffic coming from the east that goes down Wilshire, traffic from the west down the Northwest Expressway. Is there a traffic volume study that shows what kind of potential increase in traffic? I'm not talking about a full gas pump station. This is an 18-wheeler gas pump station, a big one, well lit, well done, attractive as it can be. It's illogical to assume for one moment that traffic on Wilshire, Brookside won't be impacted significantly with the installation of this facility. I don't think that the impact study you're talking about has really addressed that particular issue. Secondly, is that I noticed from the staff report that the only thing that traffic management comments were on this was your curb cuts on Northwest Expressway were too close together. And the curiosity is that have you worked with traffic management about these other factors that Lynn Copeland in an email, maybe she's on the list to talk, she got 5 or 6 things that are important, and her comment was these issues and problems are being completely ignored by the city. They relate to your client's project. They all do with these people that live at Wilshire, Brookside. They all relate to how many more cars are going to come in, particularly the east to the west traffic. The only way they're going to get there is turning onto Wilshire and up. Have you worked with the city on these other issues? I mean, just to make it, if you could create something and make it good, I'd be okay with it. But I don't think that even with what you've done, with the analysis of the volume that's going to happen here, I'm not one of you, but you just can't tell me that, well, that's a good filling station. I like those guys. I'm going to go there. I'm going to get there any way I can. I think volume increases to a point where the residents to the south are going to be severely impacted no matter if there's a traffic signal at Wilshire and Brookside.
Okay. In answer to your
I had a lot.
Question, yeah. And I think I can go through them. If I miss a point, please ask me again on it. The study does try to anticipate the best that we can how and from what direction traffic would be arriving. It would anticipate the added traffic to the street system as well as the existing traffic that might redirect their way to that site. You're absolutely right. The left turn onto Wilshire would be an excellent opportunity for westbound traffic on Northwest Highway to access the site. A second alternative would be to pass the site, make a U-turn, and come back. And there probably will be some that do that. The third thing, which I'll just tell you from an honesty standpoint, from our perspective, is that people, if it's on the left-hand side of the road, a lot of times they won't even go. If it's, for example, a peak hour during the evening peak hour, they'll access a location on the right rather than one on the left, which is a bit of a detriment to the site itself. The second question, yes, we have worked with the Transportation Division, and I failed to mention in my presentation, I apologize, that the neighbors have asked for some additional signing consideration and concern with regards to the length of the left turn bay on Northwest Highway. Those issues will be impacted by this site if it's approved, but those issues will still be there without the site itself. And we've passed that information along to the Transportation Division, where we can't make that decision for them. Ultimately, they have to make those types of decisions with regards to those signs, and I know that is a concern. Was there one other item that I missed? Okay.
Was it? Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
We have a number of people signed up to speak. David, do you want to say something before we...
If I might have Jim come up here and say a few words before they speak.
Thank you. Jim Griffith, Stillwater. I won't go through everything I went through the last time. I know you're in a hurry, but I just want to say this is a good location. I've done probably 50 locations through the year. The site is good. It's the right track for this use, in my opinion. We've worked with the neighbors. As I told you the last time, when we met with them the first time, there's no doubt they had legitimate concerns. We have gone to bat on their behalf and our behalf to try to resolve these things. And I feel that we have done a good job to help them alleviate the problems that have been there for a number of years. Somebody recently told me that without our help, they probably wouldn't have what's happening. And I think we've totally contributed, or not totally, but helped contribute to that. Basically, we're willing to do whatever we can. We don't want to tick off people who live by us. We want them to be our customers. And we will continue to help them with ODOT and everything else that we can. I did want to address Commissioner Bright. It's 4 pumps you talked about to 9 pumps. It's not 4 people buying to 18 people buying. It'll be 8 to the 18. So there's a difference, sir, but it is a little closer than
how many pumps?
There's 9 pumps, and you compared it to a 4-pumper.
But they're on both sides.
Yes, as a 4-pumper is also. The 4-pumper can do 8, we can do 18. So, again, I want to, every little bit helps, and I understand what you're saying. I'm sorry, sir.
It still adds up to 18 cars.
8 to 18.
Huh?
Goes from 8 to 18.
Okay.
Right. It wasn't from 4 to 18, so I just wanted to clarify that. But again, we've done everything that we can. I think that we've made some real progress for the neighborhood, and I would ask for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 5 people signed up to speak on this, and we would ask you to make your point, be brief if you can, and not repeat what someone has already told us, if you don't mind. First person is Scott Caldwell. And if you give us your name and address, please.
Scott Caldwell with the Shelton Voorhees Law Group, 7701 Southwestern. I represent Abdul Ghafoor, Shady Ahmed, and Sam Archangel. Previously, on August 12, 2010, we already delivered a copy of an objection to the commission, and it also had some photos attached to it. If someone on the commission hasn't actually gone out to the site, they're very good photos that show some of the problems with the roads. Won't read the letter again to you, but I would encourage the commission to give it attention and consideration along with the photos. I wanted to address a few points that I heard earlier. Number one, the large portion next to the small portion that's in question, the point was made that it's already a commercial section, so why shouldn't we make the small portion commercial? And obviously we're not here on that today, and if they want to apply for a permit for that, they should go ahead and do it.
This is an application for rezoning. That's what we're hearing.
Correct. On the traffic study, what I heard was that the traffic would not increase, but what they would do is simply existing traffic along the Northwest Expressway. so it wouldn't actually cause any increased traffic. Number one, I don't know that that's true. I may be alone, but there's been many times in my life when I've left my home just to go to the gas station and fill up and come back. So maybe I'm alone in that, but if that's the case, it would definitely increase the traffic through that.
I think he said that it would be 60 to 70% traffic already on the roadway. So there's obviously a balance that would be exactly what you're describing, which is somebody using it as a destination.
And even if that's true, we would still make additional cuts in the curve that would cause additional points of ingress and egress, and therefore multiply the existing traffic problems that's already at this intersection. Well, in short, granting the application for rezoning would generate a commercial situation that would result in the decreased desirability of the surrounding neighborhoods and increased traffic. We would ask the Commission to deny the application to rezone.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Lisa Martinez, please.
My name is Liza Martinez. I live at 7340 Edenboro Drive, just south of that particular intersection. The only thing I want to say is there's been so much time and effort spent on traffic studies and traffic and how it will affect this particular area that would give some person thought as to whether or not anything should be built there because it is so congested. The traffic light at our Brookside corner will only help alleviate some of the traffic issues that we have. And once Wilshire becomes 4 lanes, that will bring traffic from the west. So the traffic issue is going to be a huge problem, whether or not there's a light there or not, whether or not there's anything there or not. And we just want to kind of keep the status quo, work with what we've got, try to work harder. The light itself, we were told that it wasn't recommended to put a light at that intersection because it would cause traffic to sit still for longer periods of time. And so traffic will be backing up, especially with the company like OnQ. And I have nothing against OnQ. I think they're wonderful gas stations. In fact, after the September meeting, we went up to the Edmond area and we drove by the 2 OnQs that were there. And their situations are vastly different from what we've got here. There were good accesses in and out of the neighborhoods surrounding those areas. So it wouldn't have been an issue if I had lived behind those OnQs in that area because it's easy to get in and out. We just have this one entrance and we're just trying to protect it so that we can get home after we get off work. And I think OnQ would bring that much more traffic in addition to the traffic that we're going to get with the Wilshire expansion. We just don't want anything that makes it harder for us to be able to go home. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob or Ellen Cook? Or both?
We are Bob and Ellen Cook, 7805 Brookside Drive. My husband and I have lived on the corner. We are the corner house of Brookside and Wilshire for 31 years, and we support the rezoning of the Wilshire Northwest Highway property and the construction of OnQ at that location. OnQ has been very forthcoming with their plans for the property. It should be beautiful and more than willing. They have been over backwards to work with our neighborhood in pursuing signalization of the intersection, and they have assured us, as he just did, of their support in addressing some of the other street issues. My main point is, without a doubt, if OnQ's rezoning request is not approved, the land at some point in time, because it's privately owned, will be sold to some other business, and there is no guarantee that that business will be as cooperative and sensitive to the needs and concerns of the neighborhood as OnQ has been. So it's our personal opinion that OnQ will be a positive addition and will help raise the commercial standard in our area. We have got a pawn shop not far from us. I don't particularly care for the pawn shop. OnQ is a Class A operation. We are very positive since they have helped us so much with the traffic issues, and they are very dangerous issues. But OnQ has really stood beside us and with us, and we vote to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Viola Peters.
Hello, I'm Viola Peters. I live at 6205 Northwest 77th. My backyard backs right up to Wilshire. And OnQ is a beautiful place, but it's also very high impact. And that is what I'm really concerned about. At least, we have a lot of noise pollution back there right now anyway. At least now at night, we have a little bit of peace. It's a little bit quiet. Now we're going to have something that's 24 hours. And I am not for the traffic signal. The traffic signal is going to be right there. All those cars idling at the traffic light are going to be idling in my backyard. You know, all the fumes, all the Harleys, all the stuff revving their engines, you know. I'm kind of like, you know, the lady in Nichols Hills. I would like a sound barrier. You know, I would like a mason fence, whatever. And as far as the traffic signal helping with the safety of the whole area, well, maybe it would right there. You know, we've got, and that's not really representative of that map of how close our backyard is to the street. It is probably maybe 30 feet from the fence line, you know, and we've got that street there. But you've also got all the other issues from Northwest Expressway, all the people turning in there and all that. So here we have a traffic signal, which I can see why it hasn't been recommended, because it's going to restrict that flow of traffic that's going to go through there. People are going to recognize now that it's a 4-lane road. They're going to want to circumvent that Rockwell Northwest Expressway. They're going to be shooting up there, and then now we're going to have loads of cars idling in my backyard. You know, I would gladly take the bank that was aforementioned in these proceedings. I'm not saying that the land not be developed, just something that's a little bit more low impact, something that's not open 24 hours, you know. And I understand that this gas station falls within the purview of, quote, the land use. But I would hope that the health, safety, welfare of our community, of the motorists at large, would supersede any land use standard or requirement. Now, the question is it going to be a bigger burden on our community if they build there, or is it going to be a bigger burden on this large corporation that has plenty of other gas stations if they just go find them another location? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alan Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do I give my address, or is it already?
No, if you would, please, name and address.
I signed in. I am a resident of Brookhaven Edition, 7405 Clayton Drive. And I did send some email comments in, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, but I was not able to. In addition to signalization of Brookside Drive and Wilshire Boulevard, and most of us felt we did need that. We do appreciate OnQ's support for that development, which has been assured to us by Council Member Mars and Dennis Clowers that will be done. But in addition to the signalization of the intersection, there are a few other items that need to be addressed, mostly by the city. One is an ODOT matter, but we do want the city's support for it, and we need OnQ's support for it. OnQ has said they will help us with it. These items are very quickly. We feel that eastbound Wilshire needs a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign as it approaches the hill at Brookside Drive, where there is a dangerous hidden curve, and that will help slow down traffic, as will what they call speed bumps, or I believe Mr. Hoffner or Mohammed Khan said they're rumble bumps, whatever you call those, on the road to slow people down. There's a third item that has developed to our surprise. The city has added a bike path ramp on the east side of the Brookside-Wilshire intersection. It's at least 6 feet long, and it protrudes out into the intersection. This is a traffic matter. We're trying to make that intersection as safe as possible with the apparent addition of a lot of traffic if you approve OnQ. And this protrusion out into the intersection, I brought pictures for you. This protrusion out into the intersection interferes with traffic turning right from Brookside, the sharp turn on Wilshire. It makes it virtually impossible for traffic on westbound Wilshire to turn right onto eastbound Wilshire. I know that sounds impossible, but that's the configuration of the intersection. Because of this protrusion that the city has built into the intersection, it needs to be eliminated and moved back up east onto the empty triangle there. So we want the city to do that. We feel that Public Works should do that. They're building the increased four-lane Wilshire, and so we feel they should do that. We also feel that they should get the speed bumps for us and get the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign. Another matter that's contained in the memo that I handed out to you is a local traffic only sign. We need an eastbound no right turn local traffic only sign and a westbound no left turn local traffic only sign to deter traffic from going down into our addition. It already occurs. It is a problem. It's only going to be worse with the thousands of cars that will be coming out of OnQ looking for a way to avoid the burdensome, unpopular traffic signal at Northwest Highway and MacArthur. And so those signs, there is a precedent for this. Nichols Hills uses one to deter traffic on southbound Penn at Hillcrest. And it has helped reduce traffic there and reduce nuisance traffic and all other kinds of traffic there. So we think that would be a big help to us. If you're going to approve this application, we would like for OnQ and the city the Public Works Department to commit that they will undertake to do those things. A fifth item is, let's see. Of course, none of us has a crystal ball. As one of you has pointed out, we don't know how much traffic is going to be added to the already complex, atypical intersection of Brookside Drive and Wilshire Boulevard. There may not be another intersection like that anywhere in creation. And to add the thousands of cars that we're going to be adding with OnQ, it would be nice to see a traffic volume impact study. I know OnQ did a traffic study, but that was in relation, I think, to the signalization. It would be good to know how many cars are going to be projected to come through there and whether the intersection can tolerate it. I mean, whether it is just workable or not. Are we going to be able to get in and out during rush hour? Even with a signal, there may be so darn many cars there that it's impossible. I think we would have some comfort zone, I would anyway, if we could see a traffic volume impact study, whether it's done by the city or by OnQ, I think it's something that we definitely need. My comments today are made on my behalf. Brookhaven has no neighborhood association. I guess we're a bit of a renegade in that respect, Mr. Chairman. However, Twin Lakes Neighborhood Association did authorize me to speak for them as well today. So,
well, Alan, a number of points that you've raised regarding signage and so forth, those are traffic commission issues.
Right.
So you'd have to take those things up with the traffic commission. We don't have anything to do with signage or changing speed limits or things of that sort.
Could be, yeah. We understand that traffic commission matters, but the Public Works is building this road, and does that mean that we're now going to have to go over to the traffic commission and spend several months there trying to get things that could just be installed while we're building the road?
Well, if you're asking for things like local traffic only and speed limit change signs and so forth, the answer is yes, that's not something we can do.
Okay. All right.
Those are definitely traffic commission. Steve, can you answer one question that Mr. Harris has about traffic volume analysis and what you did with respect to that?
Right. In the traffic study that we did, to the best of our ability, we made those projections and added them to the traffic, and the models that we looked at that evening at the neighborhood meeting had all the projected traffic in there from the OnQ. We definitely had that put in there. And again, it's based on our best estimates of how the traffic would be distributed and added in there. And it included 40% new traffic but all the traffic at the driveways.
Right. Thank you.
What does 40% new traffic mean? What does that mean?
That means cars that are not currently there, generated by the OnQ.
Now, is there a written study that we could look at, or was
Yes.
that just part of the presentation?
No, there's a written study.
Okay. Thank you. One other thing I wanted to mention, it is in my written comments. The left turn lane on westbound Northwest Highway needs to be lengthened just to be safe right now, but with the addition of 40% new traffic, and OnQ desires for people to be able to turn left off of the Northwest Highway, intersections like that are under the jurisdiction of ODOT are pretty much their stepchild. We're advised that, that these problems around Oklahoma City that are really state highways, if that one is any example, they tend to get ignored. And so we are hopeful that both Mr. Clowers and OnQ can support us when we go to see someone in Mr. Ridley's office. Senator David Holt has said that he will support us on that. That definitely must be addressed, and we appreciate the help of anybody and everybody who can help us get ODOT to remedy that very inadequate left turn lane.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Okay, commissioners, questions and comments?
I had one question, Mr. Hoffner, and thank you for your comments, Mr. Harris. 40% new traffic is how many cars? How many vehicles does 40% new mean? If you could give me that number, that'd be.
Well, I had all the pages marked. But
I understand. You can come back if we want to move on, John, while he's looking that up. We don't have to. I didn't mean.
Well, the driveways are in the, depending on what time of the day, it's
right.
Anywhere from 10 to, I think the highest driveway is about 70 movements in and out of those driveways. So that's the type of volume over an hour's time. I swear I had it right here. There we go.
While he's doing that, Commissioners, any other comments or questions of the applicant or Mr. Hoffner? Anyone else who didn't sign up to speak who would like to on this matter?
The PM peak is about 172 in and 172 out, so it'd be about 40% of that.
That would be 68.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
4 times 17 being 68. Is that on an hourly basis, Steve?
Yeah, that would be, that's
in an hour.
PM hour.
Okay. That'd be your peak load.
Correct.
Okay.
just a few more things. I'll keep it brief. I believe it was Ms. Peters discussed the concern of noise pollution. All of the canopy will actually face Northwest Highway. There will be a drive-through that is on the Wilshire side of the property that will not have a speaker system. It will simply be a drive up to the window, talk to the person, tell them what you want. So no speaker system. And the landscaping plan, OnCue is going to build berms and trees and are willing to work with the neighbors to make it a site that not only looks very nice, but you know, helps with that buffer and berms and trees. We think that would help. This site, like we have said time and time again, it's very unique. It's just 0.46 acres, and the only reason it's even zoned R1 is because this was ODOT surplus. And when they released it, it went to R1 zoning, and the real question is what use is appropriate for this R1 tract. I would submit that certainly residential is not appropriate, and with the other portion of the property being commercial and the things that we put in place, we feel that the spud is appropriate and will make a good site. Any other questions?
Yeah, we'll get you back in a minute. My understanding now, David, is that the city and OnCue have agreed together as to how they will pay for the signalization?
Yes, sir.
When will that occur?
We submitted an offer. City legal, I think, has to sign off on it. But as we said, we're willing to pick up Mr. Hoffner's engineering fees and then pay a certain cash amount to the installation of it. It's just a matter of once that offer or agreement gets submitted, legal has to sign off on it. So we're in the process of kind of working with them and waiting for an answer. But we absolutely have every intention of doing that.
Okay. If I was to support this, it would be with the clear understanding that those things would happen simultaneously.
Meaning?
Meaning the signalization would occur as the development does, so we don't have the development there and then the signal comes several years later.
The traffic, it's already in the process of being a change order to the construction out there, so that signal will be there long before, if this were approved, long before the construction or opening of this site. It's going forward anyway.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
David, before we have our discussion, I would like to address the technical evaluations.
Yes, sir.
And what you agree to and what you don't agree with.
Well, technical evaluation number 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, we are in agreement with. Technical evaluation number 4, we asked for in the PUD a 20-foot monument sign with the C3 display area allowed and would like level 2 display.
And how far away is this monument sign that you want with the EMD display sign from a residential area? Yeah, I just wanted to know, and will somebody measure it when they put it up there?
It would be permitted by the sign ordinance, but you have also adopted a PUD sign policy. All signs 8 foot, 100 square feet, EMD level 1. And if they want more, they come make a case to the commission.
So
it's your sign policy, not the
it's
ordinance.
our sign policy.
Right.
PUD sign policy.
PUD sign policy.
Not the EMD sign policy.
Not the EMD ordinance.
Wow, that's a train wreck.
So that's TE number 4. TE number 5, as we discussed, our plan is asking for, if we're speaking of the overall site, 2 different access points on the Northwest Expressway, therefore keeping the 1 access point in the SPUD.
How many locations do you have in the metro right now?
I have 8 metro locations.
How many of those locations do you have a 20-foot pole sign?
All of them.
Okay, a 20-foot sign.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, all of them have. I'm asking for the same sign that
They
you
all have
approved at all my
You
other
do-
locations.
you have the one in Edmond? Do you have a 20-foot sign on your
Yes.
location in Edmond?
Yes, sir.
But it's not EMD because they don't allow it.
Midwest City, Dale City, those
Midwest
are
City and
20-foot
Dale
signs?
City, yes, I have that also, right. And then several places, like on Reno and MacArthur, the city allowed me to put a second sign that was bigger. I have a second sign in Dale City. I have a second sign, but it's a 20-footer also in Midwest City. The Edmond sign that you talked about, Commissioner Bright, does not have the reader board part. In fact, we were the first people that were okayed to put electronic price sign in Edmond.
Okay, let's get Ms. Peters back.
I'm sorry, what?
The concern I have about the noise pollution is more from the signalization.
You need to address us, please.
So, excuse me. The noise I have about the noise pollution is, some of it is about the facility itself, but mainly about the traffic light that is added. And I'm opposed to the traffic light, but I understand that everybody seems to see a need for it. However, this is going to put a significant burden on the use and enjoyment of our property, and I'm asking that you not pass this proposal unless perhaps they agree to provide those 3 or 4 residents with a back barrier wall. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, further discussion? Mike, what was the sign discussion you referred to David to earlier?
I guess the question is now then, with respect to this, the way I understood the last application, the request was a variance with respect of our policy for display. I think that's a fair comment. Now what I understand is that it's not a variance with respect, or a difference. We'll leave the technical term out. It's not at odds with our EMD sign display, but it's at odds with our PUD
right.
electronic display. So, gee, I don't know what to do. I mean, frankly, it seems that we've built some sort of, maybe I am wrongly assessing it, but it seems that we have an internal conflict in our own policy.
It's accurate to say that it's at odds. I think what JJ is saying is that it's just our standard policy that people have to come to us on PUDs and make their case.
No,
is that right?
A subtlety,
Is that
perhaps.
actually? Yeah. I mean.
Okay. So, the sign that you are proposing, would it be in conformance with the EMD sign display ordinance? That's my...
Yes.
It would be?
Yes, it would be.
Okay, great. That's what I want to know.
Okay.
But they're asking for level 2. But the level 2 would be in conformance, Bob. Not the PUD, but with the EMD.
Because it's on Northwest Highway.
Okay.
Which kind of gets to my point about the complexity. We were really simple when we voted. It was 9-0. Leave them alone. Don't.
Well, we lost that vote.
We lost
so
that.
Move on.
I'm never going to stop talking about it.
Okay. I think we've had enough discussion. Commissioners, let's take a position and move this one on. Mike, you're in Ward 1. You want to tackle it?
You know, this application has always been difficult for me, and I think for the entire commission. I think it boils down to, at least for me, is that again, I think the world of OnCue, I think they're a wonderful business. I'm not convinced that given the issues that are inherent in this location, which were not of OnQ's doing. That I live in this area, I frequent this intersection. Actually, I try not to frequent this intersection, frankly, for the reasons, a lot of the reasons that are stated. I think that one thing that Commissioner Bright raised to me that was an issue is that currently, with regard to Northwest Expressway, I don't think we don't have a destination corner there on westbound Northwest Expressway. I think that this potentially creates a destination for westbound. I mean, I'm sure Mr. Griffin would expect that would be the case, that for westbound traffic on Northwest Expressway, thereby injecting additional traffic onto Wilshire up to access the OnQ from the west for westbound traffic. Eastbound, I think I don't have a concern, frankly, at all. But I think the westbound movement increases traffic, and the indication is that it's 40% at peak time, which is the most concerning time to the residents as I've listened to them over the meetings, et cetera. And I think that that's an additional 70 plus 68 cars at those particular times. I don't think that helps the already very challenging problem, even with, and that's even after the intersection is modified, which is ongoing. Again, very appreciative of the effort that OnQ's made and the concerns and the things that they've done, but I just don't think I can support the application based on those factors, and so I'll move to deny.
Second.
Any further discussion, Commissioners? If not, cast your votes. 4-3, it is continued.
Continued.
It doesn't lose, huh? Unless you want to make another motion to approve it. Somebody. And if a vote will change.
I'll make a stab at it. I consider myself to be something of a neighborhood advocate. I'm always very interested in what people who live in proximity to zoning applications have to say about them. And, I have kind of a standard checklist of responses to applicants when they come before us with challenging applications, that they meet with the applicants, that they talk to, and more importantly, that they listen to the applicants, that they work with the applicants to try to address and, if possible, solve their problems. This is a very difficult piece of property. I don't think that there's anybody sitting around the horseshoe today who would dream of arguing that it is appropriately zoned R1. It is clearly a piece of property that is appropriate for some sort of commercial development. And it's a very difficult piece of property to develop for a lot of different reasons. In addition to all of that, it clearly has brought with it a lot of baggage in terms of long-standing and pent-up, let's be kind and call it aggravation, over existing traffic problems in this area and limitations on access to the residential areas that adjoin it. I think it's been really interesting. I can't remember the last time we heard a zoning application where everybody seems to agree that the applicant is a good guy, that they're trying to do the right thing, that they're working at it, that they have a quality development, a quality corporate product. Nobody wants to say anything bad about OnCue, and I, whether it's even the protesters don't want to say anything bad about OnCue, and that's really unusual. But I have to say that given all of those things, that this is probably the best use that can be made of this piece of property. I have to agree with the couple who came and spoke that it is hard to imagine another corporate developer who would work as hard to work with the surrounding neighbors and neighborhoods. And there certainly is no guarantee that if this use is not developed here, that whoever does come in eventually will make that same kind of effort. And having said all of that, I'm going to move for approval of the application.
I've got one thing, and I go by 3 of these sites. All 3 of the sites are relatively new. I go by those 3 sites probably at least 15 times a week, and I'm really surprised that there's a 40% increase in traffic there. I do not, and I'm pretty cognizant of things like that because of being on the Planning Commission. And I've really noticed a couple of those sites, and I just don't see that kind of increase in traffic. And I'm really surprised that that's, that's supposedly the facts, because I just don't see that in those 3 sites. And like I say, I frequent those sites, not necessarily to get gas, but I go by them. And I just don't see that kind of traffic problem.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve item 9. Cast your votes. Oh, breaks out the same way.
What about just a motion to move it on to council without a recommendation?
We can do that.
You can do that, or you can continue.
We can do that or continue it, our option. We're missing 2 commissioners, too. Pardon?
Oh, I said I agree with Dennis that you can send it on without a recommendation, or if Dennis wishes to continue it, then they can continue it and wait for other commissioners here. But
I think you all have heard this long enough, and we appreciate that very much. But
okay, I'll take a motion to forward this to council without comment. Okay, I have a motion and a second to forward item 9 to council without comment. Cast your votes. And there we go. That's approved.
You want to hear it again?
Explain to us what happened, because in our eyes, it looks like it was the vote was the majority truth, not...
It requires a majority of 5 commissioners to approve or deny an item. The vote was 4-3.
So
we are sending it to the council with no recommendation. They'll decide.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
You're welcome.
Item 10 is ABC 723, an application by Rococo for an ABC 2 alcoholic beverage overlaying the C3 Community Commercial District at 12252 North May Avenue in Ward 2. I'm going to give it a minute.
Let him clear out. David, give him a minute. Oh, at least. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Gee, David, you're back.
David
Fire away.
Fox, 522 Colcord Drive, on behalf of the applicant. Our application today is for ABC permit. This is a space in North Park Mall that had previous restaurants for years. They were operating under a special exception since the early 80s. The reason why we are now before you is because a 6-month window occurred, therefore
Special exception
they
lapsed.
lost its special exception. Rococo is the restaurant. They have a location on Penn, if you're familiar with it. This will be a second location. We feel that this is a good use, and we ask for your approval.
No one has signed up, Commissioners?
Second.
A motion and a second to approve item 10. Cast your votes. And you're approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 11 is CE 794, an application by the Oklahoma City Department of Airports and Airport Trust to close Southwest 89th Street between South Portland Avenue and I-44 on the ramp, and to close South Portland Avenue between Southwest 89th Street and Southwest 104th Street.
Good afternoon. Mark Cranenberg, Airports Director, City of Oklahoma City. And as Airport Director, I serve as the General Manager for the Oklahoma City Airport Trust. And we're here to start the first phase of our East Side land use development that we have been planning for the last better than 2 years. I want to also make note that this is a first step in the plan that some of you were able to attend the workshop that I did for the Planning Commission a few months ago, and I think staff provided you with copies of the plan in some form or fashion, and we can always get you another copy if you need it. Closing Portland is an important first step, and also Southwest 89th Street. I want to point out, it's been so long, but we're just taking another step in a process of closed roads that have previously been done on the airport, on this side of the airport. Southwest 74th Street in the early 1990s was closed between Interstate 44 and the existing Portland Avenue. And also Portland, we're now wanting to close the south end from 89th Street to 104th Street. The north side of that from 89th Street to 59th Street was also closed, and those went also through the county, through district court, and those roads have been vacated. We're going to do this with these roads as well. I also want to make you aware that myself and the Public Works Director for the City of Oklahoma City has met with Oklahoma and Cleveland County Commissioner staff, and they know this is coming, and they are supportive of this effort as well. It's very important to make note because when you read the application, you don't get the whole story. We are going to be relocating Portland in conjunction with that land plan. That is the first step, and there will be a brand new Portland Avenue relocated, funded by bond money and also airport trust dollars, and we are underway with the solicitation process for that now. In fact, this week, the Public Works Department received solicitations, and we'll be evaluating them with Public Works in the next few weeks to get on with that design. And so this is the first step. I also want to make it clear, and it's very important, we're not wanting to burden the public with this. As Southwest 74th Street and Portland that was previously closed, these roads will, at least Portland, will remain open to the public until we relocate the new Portland Avenue, and then subsequently all those roads will be turned over to the Airport Trust for maintenance. The Public Works Department has continually tried to maintain these roads, the ones we're talking about today and also the ones that were closed in the early 1990s, so that they can be serviceable and passable by the public. I will disclose that recently Southwest 89th Street was closed by Public Works from Interstate 44 to Portland because of such a deteriorated condition. They deemed it to be unsafe. There's no plans to reopen that at this point, not in its state today. I will say that in the land plan that the airport has developed, there will be a portion, approximately 2/3 of Southwest 89th Street, which will be vastly improved from Interstate 44 to the new relocated Portland, which probably in the future will have some signal light installed there as the development continues and matures over the years. So that's what we're asking for today, and we request your favorable consideration. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I also, because I know there's a story about the development, I don't know if the overhead works or not, but I did bring an 8.5 by 11 copy of that plan that you all have previously seen, hopefully, and are aware of in case we needed to talk about it.
I don't think we can use the overhead anymore, Mark.
Okay, sorry.
Move approval.
Any questions? Action?
Move approval. Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve item 11. Cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you.
Item 12 is C-6246, a revised final plat of Fieldstone, Section 2, Ward 3.
Blaine Sheffield, Sheffield Engineering, representing the applicant. We agree with the TEs, and have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I know TE3, we are asking for a variance for the emergency, the second entrance to the addition, because we're 3 lots over the 100. But if you don't want to grant the variance, it's not going to hurt our feelings. So
My comment on that, they're 2 lots away from, I mean, it's just 2 lots away from, without, they wouldn't have to ask for the variance.
3.
Is it 3? 2 or 3?
3.
Okay, well, I move approval of the variance on T number 3.
Second. Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the variance on TE3. Cast your votes.
Move approval of the application.
Motion and a second to approve item 12. Cast your votes. And it's approved. Thank you.
thank you.
Item 13 is C-5639, an extension of the preliminary plat of Kirby Smith Industrial Park.
Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates on behalf of the applicant. We are requesting this extension. It's been a very long process. The holdup for development of this process has been the result of a very lengthy FEMA study south of this. And that study has finally made it to FEMA. It's in their final review process. We believe that once that's complete, it'll allow this property to be developed as proposed. So we'd ask for a continuance, for an extension.
Second. Motion and a second to approve item 13. Cast your votes. And that's approved.
Thank you.
Item 14, presentations on the capital improvement plan. I think, Michael, are you here to introduce this? Craig is? Where is he?
We're going to pass out some documents.
All right. We're going to pass out some documents. Craig Freeman will introduce this.
Craig's here.
And we have various department heads who will talk to their specific.
Hi, Craig.
Hello.
Thanks,
You
Craig.
guys ready?
Go ahead.
We'll get these passed out to you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Excuse me. Can we get one for, or one to Commissioner Gales? I know he wants one. He's not here today.
We can get that to him. Yes, sir. All right, the capital improvement plan is adopted every 2 years. It's a 5-year plan. We bring it back every 2 years. It goes first to the City Council. As we introduce that, we bring it back then to the Commission, Planning Commission, for the Planning Department review. It'll come back at the next meeting. I believe it's scheduled to come back for adoption, but that isn't a hard timeline. It's just what our plan is right now. So if you all need more time to review it, or if you have questions about specific projects, we can work with the staff in the various departments to get the information back to you. The book is organized by department. The projects are summarized within each department, and they're organized alphabetically throughout the book. The presentations this morning, or this afternoon, we will look at some of the various departments and give a high-level overview of the different projects within those departments. The capital planning process starts off with the departments looking at their needs, various implementation plans they have, citizen survey responses, council priorities, and then they take that to the capital planning committee that has representatives from staff members of the departments that have capital projects within the plan, and that includes the planning departments
involved in that review process. It's then reviewed by the city manager's office, brought to the city council, and then once they received it from introduction, it's brought to the planning commission, the planning staff. When it comes back for adoption, there will be a staff recommendation as to the compliance of the projects or the capital plan with the comprehensive plan. Just as a quick overview, we'll look at the overall plan is about $1.9 billion. You can look at the various funding sources. Where you see the trust funding sources, our largest funding source, most of that is either funded. Some of those are pay-as-you-go. A lot of those are funded with debt, which is, for the most part, revenue bonds. We do also have all those projects, the way that they're repaid, whether it's from cash-funded projects or from the revenue bonds, are repaid by either ratepayers for the water, wastewater utilities, or solid waste, or the passenger fares and tenant fees at the airports. The grant funds, primarily those are airports grant funds, but they also do have some with COTPA. The special sales tax funds, for the most part, are the special dedicated sales taxes, or the special tax funds, and that would be like for the Maps for Kids projects or sports facilities projects, but also the associated use tax that's approved with the sales taxes included in that. Then we have the GO bond funds provide primarily for infrastructure. That's 25% of the projects. That's repaid by the property taxes. So it's the bond fund proceeds that provide for the projects, but then the debt is repaid by the property taxes. Unfunded is a large category you can see, and the unfunded projects come in a couple of different versions. Some of the projects are projects that are actually, we've identified a funding source, but it's approved annually, and so we show a portion of that as unfunded. A good example is that is our police and fire fleet replacement, and the police chief and fire chief will be presenting their plans here in a few minutes, and they'll talk a little bit about that. But basically, we're funding that right now out of the city and schools use tax has been the way that we've been funding police and fire fleet replacement, but the council has asked that they review and approve that annually, and so part of that is in unfunded. The other unfunded projects are projects that departments have identified, but they haven't necessarily identified a source at this point. And so it's something they want to have brought out to the council's attention, to the public's attention of projects that they need to do, but the funding source has not been identified. Looking at the projects by function, public services is by far the largest, and that's going to be public works, water, wastewater, solid waste, airports, transit. Public safety is at 5%. You can see the MAPS projects make up a large portion. And actually, they're about 12.5%, and they're finished, I think it's 2013, and Eric will talk about that. So they don't go all the way through the 5 years. And then culture and recreation make up 11%. If you look at the project types, facilities are the largest portion, and this is primarily going to be the Maps for Kids projects as they finish out. And then also the airports projects make up the majority of the facilities. We do also have some projects for the arena, the Oklahoma City Arena, and then for the NBA practice facility in there as well. Streets are 15%. It's a high priority to citizens, high priority in the capital plan. Utilities make up 26.5%, and that's primarily water and wastewater utilities, and it can be line replacements and improvements. It can be treatment, and community enhancements then make up 13.6%. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Bryant to present the fire department plan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this afternoon and briefly review the 5-year capital improvement plan for the fire department. First slide here just gives you a breakdown of what we propose per year starting at 2010, ending in 2015, with the total being $32.4 million. As you can see here on this next slide, our projects by funding source, again, the largest portion of it is unfunded, and as Craig said earlier, that is mainly our fleet replacement. Again, there's no source been identified at this point, but we do have an ongoing vehicle replacement plan that we project out into the future, and so that's where the majority of those projects are located in that category. A couple of the other larger portions of this total here are the 2007 bond issue. That's for future facilities that we're going to be built that were approved by the voters in that measure. And the 2000 bond issue, we either have those projects completed or are currently under construction, so we're wrapping those up as well. A summary of projects by type. Again, you can see there either new buildings, building renovations, equipment, and again, you can see that the majority are almost half, or about half of the total of our capital improvement projects are for fleet replacement. In projects by type, again, you see that half of our total is for fleet replacement for in the future, and the largest, second largest portion is for new construction of additional fire stations. This map here gives you a look at where those projects are. The Northeast Fire Station up in the far northeast corner of the city, that project was complete. Last month, the firefighters have moved in there. That was a relocation of an existing station in the downtown area. Also, the Bricktown Fire Station that you see there is currently under construction. And the Station 7 reconstruction, actually that a better word would be a major remodel there, but it comes close to being a reconstruction because of the scope of the project. That's currently under construction as well. And the Northeast Station, the Bricktown Station, with 2000 general obligation bond issue. The Southwest Fire Station that you see down there, and the Richland Fire Station, we've bought the property for both of those projects, and we should probably start the planning phase and the architectural and engineering phase of the Southwest Station here in the next year. Station 21, Station 23, those are actually rebuilds, so when we get around to those, and they'll be later, they're 2007 bond projects, and so we'll get those in the future years. This is the Northeast Fire Station. Again, we opened that up last month. It's a very nice facility. The total cost of that project was $2.7, and that's in the ballpark of what we've estimated our future projects at about $2.5 million. This is a conceptual image here of the Bricktown Fire Station, and again, it's under construction. The estimated completion is in April of next year. And and we'll go on to fleet replacement, and that our current cost for a fire pumper, or an engine, as we refer to them, is a little over $400,000, and we estimate the cost in 2015 to be a little over $500,000, and we're basing that on a 5% inflation rate. And this gives you our vehicle replacement over the next 5 years, and the total number of vehicles for each fiscal year, and with the total being 83 vehicles, and again at the total sum of $16.5 million. And that wraps up my portion of the presentation. I'll be glad to answer any of your questions.
Keith, does the public safety sales tax provide any capital funding any longer, or is it all
We get a very small portion that we use from the public safety sales tax for capital projects, but it's mainly for operational costs, salaries of firefighters, emergency medical equipment, those types of projects that were identified in that sales tax initiative.
Thank you. Any other questions of
I have
Chief Ryan?
one question. I assume that 5 years ago you had certain unfunded projects every year. Every time you come up with this, there's probably
Yes,
Did you get them funded?
For the most part, yes, sir, we did.
And things work out during the period of time that you're looking to replace these that are unfunded, that they, what is it, from revenues, city revenues or whatever, they come in and fund what you've anticipated that you need, right?
Correct. Again, just for an example, for the last several years, we've funded our fleet replacement through the city and schools or the MAPS for kids use tax. We only have about 2 more years of that funding available to us for fleet replacement, and that's why, again, you see a large portion of our projects unfunded, because it only goes to that point, and as of yet, we haven't identified where we will be funding fleet replacement in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Would you explain that to me? I didn't quite. What about the MAPS for kids use tax relates to funding replacement?
That was just the funding source that was identified a few years ago for fire and police fleet replacement, was the use tax from the city schools or the MAPS for kids use tax.
Janice, you know what the use tax is?
I'm not sure I do.
Well, it's the equivalent of, I'll see if I get it right, Craig. It's the equivalent of sales tax on materials purchased and used in the construction of the MAPS projects. So when materials come into the city and go into a project like that.
Right. It's actually any materials or goods that are purchased outside of the state that are brought into the city for use. And the example Mr. Yokel's giving is exactly, the majority of it is going to be on capital for construction-type projects. It could be like if a new store sets up and they're buying all their shelving and things of that nature, that might be paid through the use tax. So it's a sales tax on goods that are purchased outside of the state and brought into the city for use. And the reason that we can use this or have the flexibility is that the voters approve a sales tax. The use tax, so the state law allows the city to have a use tax that's set at a rate equivalent to the sales tax rate, but it does not limit those use tax dollars to having to be used for the same purpose of the sales tax. So what the council did was approved a resolution that said it would be used for capital improvement projects. And the decision was made, this is something we brought to the council, the decision was made several years back. I think we're in our 4th year of using that source, 3rd or 4th year now, to use that as a funding source for police and fire fleet replacement because it's such a significant need for the city.
Okay. The other question I had was, when we talk about fleet replacement, when we're building new firehouses, I assume they're going to need equipment.
Yes, ma'am.
Is equipping those firehouses considered part of the fleet replacement, or does that have to come from someplace else?
Well, if it's for an additional station, we probably wouldn't consider that replacement of existing fleet because it would be additional fleet that we would be adding because that's an additional station. So, again, what you see there reflected in this presentation is our ongoing fleet replacement program. We know, for example, on those engines that you saw the slide, for about every 12 years we're going to have to replace that. And so we know 12 years from now and so forth, and that's how we set our schedule up, by their expected life expectancy.
Where does the money come from to buy the new ones then?
Again, we haven't identified that funding.
We're not sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. I'm Chief Bill City, and I'll provide you with our 5-year capital improvement plan for the police department. As you can see here, for the next 5 years, our total for capital improvements is almost $70 million. The majority of that is, you can see in years 12 and 13, and those are going to be primarily bonds. Our headquarters building project that is being funded through the last bond initiative. Summary of projects, you can see where the police headquarters is the largest, which is $37.8 million. Again, that's funded through bonds. The mobile equipment, again, is like fire, it's police equipment. That's $27.2 million. Most of that is unfunded, but it is funded through the use tax. It just has to be approved every year by the City Council. Projects by type, again, you can see where our police courts complex makes up 54% of that, again, funded through bonds, and mobile equipment makes up 39% of that, again, through the use tax. Projects by funding source, you can see where the unfunded is 33%. Again, that's the use tax we spoke of. I'm glad the explanation was done before I got up here, so we should have a clear picture of that. But it is, again, it has to be approved every year, and it's for vehicle replacement when we talk about unfunded, our unfunded projects. Again, the GO bond projects are all will be our headquarters, our public inebriate facility, and also our new Southwest briefing station. This is our headquarters building. It's about 78,000 square feet. We have about 240 employees in that facility. Construction of the building that you see there, majority of that building was built in the 60s. We have a new section that we share with courts. We have 2 floors for police, and courts has 2 bottom floors. It was built in 1980. That's the newest portion of the headquarters building. The courts building, again, it was built also, parts of it in the 60s with the 1980 portion I spoke of that we share with them. They actually occupy about half of that. Their current space is about 45,000 square feet, and they have 62 employees in that facility. The Police and Courts Complex project, the bond was for $37.8 million. We have already hired the Architectural Design Group, ADG, to have the contract to actually design that project. When it went to council, the council had asked for a evaluation, a reevaluation of that project, and asked ADG, a contract with ADG, to do that. They are presently in the process of doing that, and their presentation will be presented to council sometime here in the next probably month or so to determine exactly what that project's going to be. Our Southwest Briefing Station project, again, it's bond funded. The proposed site right now is the 6200 block of South Portland. The property is actually on the airport property. It would be just on the west side of Portland, the 6200 block. The building size would be approximately 10,000 square feet, a proposed cost of about $3 million. The Will Rogers Station, you can see the proposed site is in yellow. The Will Rogers Station, you can see there in the center, will actually be closed. Now, there may be some other use for it within our department or the city that hasn't been determined at this point, but we will actually move our operations, redistrict, reestablish where our personnel should be, and open the new site up in the Will Rogers Station. One of the reasons also for having it at Will Rogers, at some point we're going to have to move our helicopter facility, which sits at the old downtown air park. And at some point we're going to have to move that when development starts, and we're talking about coexisting our air support facility at our Southwest Briefing Station facility sometime in the future. That's not set in stone at this point, but it is under discussion, and possibly we could reduce the cost of having to do that by establishing that facility there. Our vehicles, currently our cost on our vehicles this year was about $23,000. That doesn't include all the equipment. If you add all the equipment, that cost of that vehicle is up around $44,000. But this is what we get when we order them. Our projected cost for the purpose of the CIP in 2015 would be about $28,000. We kind of estimate about a 5% increase in the cost of that every year for the next 5 years. The projected police 5-year fleet replacement. We replace our vehicles at about 100,000 miles. It takes about 5 years to put 100,000 miles on a black and white vehicle. Our unmarked vehicles, that's considerably longer, and some of them we keep longer than 5 years. But we like to drive the vehicles as long as possible, while at the same time making sure that the vehicles are maintained well and are kept safe for our officers, because they are used in high-speed pursuits and things like that. So 100,000 miles is when we try to rotate the black and whites. Most of our cars are in operations, about 580 black and white vehicles, where the majority of our vehicles are. You can see our replacement plan over the next 5 years. We show we're in 14 and 15, predict having to add about 240 vehicles just based on the lifetime of the vehicles, for a total of almost $20 million over that 5 years. This year, we show 145. We actually ended up ordering about 90 vehicles, so somewhat less, depending on what our needs are, and it may be less the next year. So, but this is an estimate based on the 100,000 miles. Police helicopter 5-year needs. This is probably one of our most expensive units to operate, just because of the fuel and the helicopter, the expense on the helicopters and maintaining them. You can see what the total cost is over the next 5 years at $5.1 million. Now, this does include the replacement of both of our helicopters, both in 2012-13 and 2014-15. We do have 2 helicopters. Our oldest one was purchased, I believe, in 2001, and I think the other one was purchased in 2003. We used to only keep our helicopters every 3 years and exchange them every 3 years before they needed an extensive maintenance, which is very costly. We extended the life of those, and we've done the overhauls over the last 10 to 12 years and saved the city quite a bit of money in doing that. So, but we do feel like at about 12 years. Originally, we thought 10 years would be a good replacement plan for helicopters. It'll actually be 12 or 13 by the time we actually purchase new helicopters, as long as the funding's there to do that. Any questions? Glad to answer some. I'm glad you answered most of the use tax.
Did you leave that briefing station off out southeast? Oklahoma City?
Did I leave it off?
Did you forget about it?
I don't know, did I?
No, I'm just
I'd have to
teasing.
look at it.
I'd like to see one out there.
Way southeast. I thought we had a southeast. That's our Santa Fe station. That's our South Indian.
We've got a fire station out there, Chief.
You've got lots of fire stations now. We want to start comparing facilities, and I'm willing to put mine up against fires. I've got a lot more than we do.
What is envisioned for the downtown, sort of the headquarters complex? Is it going to be torn down and completely rebuilt? Is it going to be remodeled and expanded? What's going on with
Well,
that?
I could talk about that, but it's really premature under these circumstances because I've been working with ADG in reevaluating that project, but it really needs to go before council. That council had asked for that, and it's kind of premature for me to speak of what we envision. What they want to look at, because the original project that went on the bond issue that went before the public was a remodel. And they wanted to reevaluate the cost of doing a remodel versus a new facility, and that's what's being done.
Okay.
Okay, so it'll be a comparison of that, showing what the differences in cost they estimate the cost will be between remodel, partial remodel, new building, all new facility, those types of things are the things they're looking at.
And then I heard a thing recently about that they're going to stop making Crown Victorias, and that police departments are having a hard time finding a model that they like as well for replacement. Is that an issue for us?
Well, they are going to quit. They are going to quit making the Crown Vic. They've made that Crown Victoria a police model for years and years and years, and that's what we've purchased for black and whites. We do use Impalas, which are 6 cylinders, get better gas mileage, smaller vehicle for our unmarked vehicles for our detectives. But we have used that Crown Vic because of the size, and it's a good vehicle and has been. They're replacing it with within the next 2 years with a Taurus model, specifically built for police work. So it's going to have, it'll be different than the regular Taurus on the street, but they are going to be providing a police vehicle. So you'll have the three primary vendors will be General Motors, the Challenger, Dodge Challenger, and then also the Ford Taurus. But they'll still be in the business. It'll just be a different vehicle.
Okay. Any other questions, Commissioners? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Eric Wenger. I'm the MAPS Program Manager for the City of Oklahoma City, and we're pleased to present today the MAPS Office 5-year capital plan. As Craig mentioned, the MAPS for Kids program is going to be winding up in the next 3 years, and so this is actually a 3-year plan presentation that I have for you today. There are 3 major components of the MAPS for Kids program. We've talked about construction with the new and renovated school facilities. There's also the technology and the suburban schools program that serves the 23 other school districts that are serviced by our city students. And so that's probably one of those things that we sometimes forget, is that Oklahoma City is the largest independent school district in our city limits, but there's actually 24 total school districts that our students go to. The 3-year plan that we have that is beginning this year and ending in FY13 is a total of $245.6 million. You can see that we are in a peak year this year. Last year was also one of our construction peak years, but you can see that tapering off for the final year being just under $40 million. If you look at this by project type, the vast majority is in construction at about $200 million. Technology is also a large component. As a part of construction, we're going in and placing wireless campuses at all schools. This would be elementary, middle, and high schools. There's also desktop computer replacements and things that are in this final phase. The suburban schools is a grant program. We do distribute those funds to those 23 suburban districts as long as those projects are construction, transportation, and generally technology. Those funds are just dispersed, and then they manage those independently. That program actually can continue past the FY13 period. The agreement that the City Council reached was that that can go until the year 2017, but they are expending it at a pretty consistent rate. It began at $150 million, and there's just about $20 million remaining. When we look at the total by type, and this would be by percentage, you can see there's about 84% of that being construction. The other 2 are smaller percentages at 8.5% for the suburban and 7.7% with technology. And then, of course, it is a single funding source, and this would be the MAPS for Kids or the OC MAPS sales tax at 100%. This is the I-89 district, or the Oklahoma City Public School District, that's generally located in the center part of Oklahoma City, and the 70 red dots that you see on this are the 70 school locations that we've either renovated or built new. And then as we look at the completed schools, we actually completed 8 schools this fall. They're in various stages of substantial completion and going through final acceptance, and those are not included in the 20 for prior years. But again, you can see the peaking and then the tapering of the 6 schools in the final year for a total of 70. As a part of completed schools, this would be the FY10 completed schools. This was one of our large new additions. This is Heronville Elementary on Southwest 29th Street. We new addition replaced over 20 portable buildings that were on that site. This new addition equals the size of the existing construction. The interiors of the school, the new addition matches that of the older, and so it's very hard once you're inside the school to tell that you're in the new or the old part of that school. Mark Twain Elementary, which is just here on West Main Street, also a renovated and new addition. At the top left, the existing schools on the left portion, you see the new entry, and then to the right is their new media center and admin. This is something that we're doing at each of the elementary schools, centralizing those entry points, making sure that we're providing safe and secure points of access for visitors. This is just one example of many elementaries that have been renovated. In the lower right, you can see some of the architect's use of color at those elementary levels, color coding hallways, making them light and vibrant again. This is a renovated high school, Oklahoma Centennial High School. This was formerly a middle school that then over time was converted to elementary, and as a part of Maps for Kids, we've upgraded it to a high school. And so some of the things that were added to that, of course, is a high school auditorium, a high school competitive gymnasium, but also things like you see in the lower right-hand photo. We have high school laboratories that you can see that they use for a lot of their classroom instruction. Stained Wadey Elementary, another one of our unique additions to an existing historical construction. This is the new addition, as you see in the upper left, with the new drop-off lane, relieving some of the traffic congestion on its adjacent street, new entryway, and in the lower right was one of the construction progress photos. This was actually the old space between the new and the old building that was converted to the media center. It's in use today, but it's a 2-story media center space. On the left is the new construction with the windows for the classrooms that down and look into that media center. On the right-hand side, you'll actually see some of the old historical brick on the exterior of the existing building. And under construction and nearing its completion is Putnam Heights Elementary. This new addition in the upper left-hand photo has since been completed, and in the lower right, we're just showing some of the classroom remodel of those existing spaces. We're able to, in a lot of historical buildings, salvage those wooden floors, able to sand those down and repair them and make them new again. We're also upgrading the old chalkboards and making sure those are marker boards, and this is consistent throughout all the schools as we've done as a part of MAPS. And Wilson Elementary, which is just here on North Walker, another unique school, historical in nature. This was the connecting corridor that you see in the upper left-hand photo. The new school is actually, or I should say the new administration and classrooms is on the left, the connecting corridor, and then the existing school on the right. They're the Wilson Wolves. They're an arts integration school, and we actually worked very closely with the neighborhoods there. They donated over $700,000 to enhance that program. One of the things that we looked into is this art wall that was created by Studio Architecture. It's a artist rendition of the chase scene of Peter and the Wolf. Each of the different colors is one of the characters, and it's the musical score. What's not completed are the black strips, which is the percussion, which is in the dirt in the foreground. But that's since been completed today. It's backlit at night. It's a unique piece of architecture for that community, so I would invite you to possibly go by there and see that piece of artwork. The technology projects, as we've mentioned, these are being implemented as a part of construction. Obviously, a lot of these schools don't have the electrical or the network access to put in a lot of new technology to we're able to renovate them, but we have less than $19 million remaining in systems, and this also includes classroom phone systems throughout the district. In the suburban schools, this is the map, and I'll reference Oklahoma City in the center, but it does also include the other 23 suburban school districts that we are dispersing funds to. Largest district is Putnam City in the medium blue color. They have over 15,000 Oklahoma City students attending that district and received a little more than $45 million as a part of the Maps for Kids program. And then, as we've discussed, the school construction and renovations, computers and technology equipment, there's actually less than $20 million in that account remaining today, and we continue to see monthly applications for expenditure from those districts at our monthly meetings with the Maps Trust. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Eric, I have one. You went on the technology projects, desktop computers, classroom phone systems, et cetera, and said there's $18 million left. Does that mean that you will or won't be able to complete these tasks in all the buildings?
We are actually well within our budgets and will complete all tasks, all construction tasks, all technology tasks. The original technology budget was actually in excess of $50 million. We've been successful in actually doing a lot of bulk purchasing as a part of desktop computers, and we've actually received some very favorable bids. It's obviously a lot more efficient to buy 2,000 computers at a time as it is to buy them one by one. And so as we've seen those great prices, we will more than complete the program and have some reserve funds for Maps for Kids, including the technology projects.
Commissioners, any other questions?
My children happen to attend Nichols Hills Elementary School, where they've done some improvements to Maps for Kids. And I know that they've had a few sort of after completion glitches. Is there money to go back and deal with those things that's available through this funding for, I mean, not just for that school, but I mean throughout, as things are completed and maybe little things don't work quite the way they're supposed to, is there money that's going to be available to deal with those issues?
And the answer is yes. We actually have several schools that we've located some either issues where certain standards weren't in place when a school was constructed. We're actually in the process now of upgrading Grant High School's security system. It was one of the first high schools, and there's some modern technology that we were able to install at the other high schools that we're going back to do now. At Adams Elementary, we actually have some reoccurring roof leaks that were not replaced as a part of construction, and so we're considering that as well. The issues at Nichols Hills actually still happen to be under the contractor's purview. We have not completed 100% of the construction, so I believe the two issues that are outstanding there, which have to do with the sprinkler system and some of the some storm issues that actually occurred, are still something he's going to repair at his own cost. But yes, we are maintaining a contingency fund with Maps for Kids to take care of those issues as they might arise. That's also to help us protect our future projects. We have about 20 projects remaining to bid. The market's somewhat volatile, but with that, we have had the reserve funds to go ahead and award our construction and proceed without delay.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Wendell Whisenhunt, Director of Parks and Recreation. First, let me thank you for, after such a long day, for accommodating us today, and you'll be pleased that I'll be brief. If I were speaking to you in 1994, I would be telling you of all the woes that we have in the park system, and there were many. I'd be telling you that it's been 21 years, ladies and gentlemen, since we've had bond issue funds to make significant improvements in the parks. I would be telling you that the park system's almost broken, ladies and gentlemen. But I'm really pleased to tell you that that's not the case anymore. After the votes in 95, 2000, and again in 2007, we've already made great strides in improving the parks, and as you can see before you, in the next 5, we're going to make about $77 million more strides in the park system in Oklahoma City. So for in the next 5 years, our budget for capital will be about $77 million. I'm still, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, almost shocked at that because I lived through those 21 years when we had none. So I'm very pleased. Every day I'm pleased with that. About $52 million of that 77 is for outdoor park improvements of all types. About $8.9 million is for facility or building type improvements in the parks, and about $16.9 million is for paving, walks, paths, and trails in the parks. As you can see in this pie chart, about 74% of the funds we'll spend are on general outdoor improvements in the parks, and you'll see what some of those are here in just a minute. About 18% walks and paths and trails, and about 8% facility improvements. As you can see here, the predominance of our funding source are bond issue funds. As has always been the case, our CIP is primarily funded by bond issues. Our income source from others is fairly minimal. Park improvements, as I mentioned, one of our categories, is helping us put an entirely new scan on the Crystal Bridge at the Mary Botanical Gardens, something that we very much needed. It was to the point where we were a little embarrassed to call it crystal any longer because it really wasn't. It was more yellow than crystal. We'll also be making large numbers of improvements on such things as play courts, as you can see, tennis courts, basketball courts, large numbers of additional playground improvements that have been very popular out the community, by the way, those that we've installed. And our commitment to ADA in the parks will continue in a large way. Athletic field improvements are something we still need to make a lot of, and we will in the next 5 years. We will continue to make improvements that will cause the parks to be more heavily used. I'm sure you've noticed already that there are a lot more people using the parks now than there were just a few years ago. Park improvements like playgrounds, as I mentioned, will take us from the old-fashioned playground that you see on the left, where there's no safety surface and the placement is not exactly as we'd like to have it, to a playground like you see on the right, in many cases where we have poured-in-place surfaces that at least poured in place where the impact zones are at the bottom of slides and swings, where the surfaces are very, very safe for the children. We've also noticed that the playgrounds have really brought families back to the park. We have a lot of guardians and older brothers and sisters there with the little kids, and we're glad to see that. Facility improvements, we have a great deal of need in our recreation centers and picnic pavilions as good examples of improvements that we'll make outdoors. The park system still has needs, and by the time we finish this 5 years, new needs will certainly develop, but we're going to be very close to our goal by the end of the 5 years. I believe in 5 years I'll be able to come to you and say, yes, we do now have one of the finest park systems in the United States. We are convinced we're going to be able to get there. Our paving, walks, paths, and trails funds will help us do a lot of improvement on park roads. We have great needs there. They are not city streets. They are not funded with street funds. They're funded with park bond funds. We'll continue to build trails throughout the city to implement the Trails Master Plan. Trails are still one of our most heavily requested items, and we know when we build one they will be used. Always convinced of that. So we are encouraged in the Parks and Recreation Department that we're on the right track, and another 5 years will get us closer to our goal. I'd like to answer your questions now.
I have a comment, Wendell, and that's in connection with, we all are just, the big picture is yours. My picture is my little neighborhood, and the median on 19th Street that goes through Linwood, and there's a little park at the corner of 19th Street and Drexel, and the median on Drexel. You didn't say, you said park improvements, et cetera, but what you guys have done is you've mowed the median for the last 2 years rather than the grass grow to 2 feet high as it used to go. You guys are doing a great job with just mowing the median, and I hope that there's a budget here for maintenance, planting flowers, and doing all those things, because you've done perfect with my neighborhood. Thank you.
Well, you can't imagine how much I like hearing that, because that was certainly one of our weaknesses in the past. We are doing better primarily because of efficiencies. It's not as if we have great deals of more money to take care of that task, but we do search for efficiencies, and we found
Well, you've done this in my little world where I live. You've done really a nice job, and I thank you and your staff and all the fellows that are out there with mowers.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Okay, all right.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Wendell.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Paul Bronson. I'm the Assistant Director of Public Works, and I'm going to provide you a very high-level overview of the capital improvement plan as it relates to the Public Works Department. Prior to getting started, as you thumb through the plan, you will see that there are numerous pages upon pages that consist of public works type projects of all types of infrastructure. As you go through the plan, if you have any specific questions about scheduling of any of those, if you would channel those to Russell, I'm sure he'd be happy to get those to either myself or Mr. Clowers if you have any specific, because there's just a ton of information in the plan that there's way too much there to go over today. So with that, here's our plan by fiscal year. As you will see, the funding level in years 1 and 2 is quite a bit more than the last 2, or the last 3 rather. That is due in part to the large amount of funding that's in there for the sports facilities projects that are still under construction, the practice facility, the Ford Center, et cetera, and also the funding that is in the plan in relation to Project 180. The last 3 years of the plan are much more typical of what you would normally see in a public works plan as it relates to our general obligation bond type projects. Here is a summary of projects by type, and again, streets is our highest priority. It received the greatest amount of consideration in the 2007 GO bond authorization. And again, down at the bottom, the facilities portion is, again, it's attributable to the sports facility improvements. This slide combines the previous two and attempts to give you an idea of exactly how ambitious the plan is, especially in the current fiscal year and next year, again, for funding in streets related to Project 180 and the sports facilities improvements. I've been told by staff that the level of funding and activity in the current fiscal year is the largest that Public Works has ever undertaken. Here's a depiction of our expenditures for the next 5 years. Again, years 1 and 2 are much more ambitious than the last 3, but all combined, our average with general obligation bond type projects and other type projects that we undertake on average is about $108 million per year. Here's a pie chart that shows you exactly how it's broken down by a 5-year history of the type of work that we've awarded. As you can see, streets again, by and large, the largest portion there at 45%. The other category includes city buildings, the Cox Center, the ballpark, the Ford Center, the canal, the fairgrounds, the Marion Botanical Gardens, the zoo, the Oklahoma River, and that's why it's such a large portion compared to the other 3 or 4 categories there. Here is a snapshot of our work and the work that's under construction now and the work that we contemplate over the next 4 years as to its current status. As you can see, we have approximately 70% that is either in construction or design at the present time. This chart shows our work over the next 5 years as far as funding source is concerned. As you can see, with the passage of the 2007 GO bond authorization, almost 70% of our work is funded through that program. The 13% funded under the tax increment financing is related to Project 180. Here's an illustration of how our work is broken down by project type. Again, streets, 67%. In all the recent citizen surveys, condition of our city streets has been the #1 priority of the survey respondents as to the area of city service that absolutely needs the most attention. So that's why in the 2007 authorization it received, almost $500 million worth of funding for widening and for resurfacing type projects. Here is The next few slides are just some examples of some recently completed work. Here's Western Avenue up in the north central part of town from Northwest 150th to Northwest 164th, which was just completed here within the last 8 months or so. Here's an area, with Oklahoma City being as big as it is, we have hundreds of small rural type bridges, which to the folks that live in the inner city may seem quite insignificant, but when we're talking about school bus traffic and public safety traffic, we need to keep these bridges up. Here's a prime example of the thing that we get faced with every once in a while. On the left is an example of a rural bridge. I'm not quite sure of the location, but that's the type of thing that happens. And on the right is a very good illustration of our use of general obligation bond funds to bring those up to standards to be able to carry the school buses and the fire engines, et cetera. The next project is a detention pond that is part of the Lightning Creek Basin in southwest Oklahoma City, recently completed. With the flooding we had on Lightning Creek here this past summer, this pond was absolutely needed, especially after the Mother's Day flood back in 1993, if you all remember that. We undertook a series of improvements here, and then again up to the north in Oliver Park, where we added 2 or 3 different detention ponds on the Lightning Creek Basin to help alleviate the problems we experienced back in 93. Here's an example of one of those ponds. Here's an artist rendering of the Northwest Library, which is located at Northwest 122nd and MacArthur. Here's a daytime rendering. The next slide is a nighttime rendering. Here's a rendering of the Southwest Library, which is going to be located at Southwest 134th in Pennsylvania. Here are some artist renderings of Project 180. On the lower left, Mike, just go back one. On the lower left, you've got a typical streetscape. On the upper right is a rendering of what the Myriad Botanical Gardens will look like after completion. This next slide is the Great Lawn and the band shell at the Myriad Botanical Gardens. And with that, I'd be happy to attempt to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners, questions?
I'm just curious, do you have enough people to spend $500 million worth of public works projects over the last 5 years, or the next 5 years?
Yes and no. The council has been quite gracious over the last several years to allow us to add staff, to add project managers, to allow us to undertake the level of spending that we need to do in order to get the projects completed, in order to meet IRS regulations with regard to timely expenditure of the funds. So they've been very good to us over the last couple of years. We could always use more people, but we're holding our own right now.
Thank you.
I was curious, I actually had meant to ask Wendell this question, but Project 180 and funding for that and Parks and Recreation, and how is all that going to fit together and work?
It's a combination of the general obligation bond program, both including the street work and Parks and Recreation money, and then the TIF money from the Devon development. It's all interrelated, and there's a schedule as to how the projects are going to be awarded and what funds are used. It's quite extensive. There's a plan that's been laid out as to how we're going to expend the funds and what's going to pay for what, and it's going quite well right now. We just awarded here on Tuesday Package 3, Package 1 and Package 2 of the streetscape projects. As you can tell, if you drive around downtown a little bit, we're going fast and furious because there are completion dates that the contractors are striving to meet. So it's all intertwined as far as all the different funding sources.
Craig, isn't there actually a borrowing facility against the TIF, the Devon TIF money?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Water shouldn't have to be last, should it?
Alphabetically, it's wonderful. We enjoy being the invisible infrastructure to the extent we can. Commissioners, I'm Marcia Slaughter, Utilities Director, and I'm very pleased to present the 5-year water and wastewater capital plan. The water CIP totals $73.8 million in fiscal year 11 and $272 million in the 5-year program. The water capital program includes neighborhood replacements, transmission mains, storage and pumpage, water treatment plants, and raw water supply investments. Pretty much all parts of the water infrastructure are touched in the program. In this map, this map shows you the location of the 5-year program. The red lines are transmission mains that are being built. The dots and circles are neighborhood improvements and plant and pump station improvements. More than half the water capital program is going into treatment plants in this 5-year cycle. I want to share with you a couple of the key projects in the water system. In an earlier map, I showed you a water line going west, generally following Southwest 164th Street, going north to the corner of Southwest 104th in Portland, and then following north along Portland. That transmission main is bringing more water into southwest Oklahoma City, resolving some pressure problems and delivery problems that you hear about from time to time when we're looking at major industrial users in southwest Oklahoma City. We'll be building a booster station and a ground storage tank in the general area of southwest 104th in Portland at $11.3 million. We're also making a 25 million gallon a day expansion of the Hefner water treatment plant, an estimated cost of about $50 million to, again, improve the volume of water delivered in north Oklahoma City. Finally, the water capital program, $272 million over 5 years. And moving to the wastewater program. The wastewater program will make improvements in each of the watersheds that we serve. This map shows you the major infrastructure and the watersheds in Oklahoma City in which we provide service. Each of those improvements is one on which the CIP builds. The program for fiscal year 11 is $47.8 million, and the 5-year total is $191.2 million. About $30 million of the program will be spent on neighborhood improvements, $42 million in treatment plants, and 39% of the program, you see the red lines on this map, will be sewer investments that increase capacity and decrease sewer overflows. I want to draw your attention to our Winter Pump Station, which is undergoing a major rehabilitation this year. It was flooded in the June 14th 500-year flood. Its 100-year flood wall was overcome. So it is also getting a new, in addition to getting all of its major equipment replaced, it's getting a new flood wall. And finally, just to let you know, we're making improvements at each of the wastewater treatment plants, whether we're expanding or rehabilitating them. 5-year program for sewer is $191 million and combined $463 million. And of course, I'd be happy to answer questions. It's about $30 million for sewer.
Well, I got a question. With all the treated water that is going north on Douglas Boulevard, if I'm not mistaken, you got a 48-inch line or a 60-inch line, and I believe there's 2 of them. Is that not correct?
Mr. Samandi, who manages the capital program, is here with me and will answer that question, I know.
Okay.
Let me introduce you to Sam Samandi.
There's only one 60-inch line on Douglas Boulevard. There's other smaller lines on the west side of it, but it's not as big.
Okay. How many water lines extend to the east?
To the east from there, there aren't very many lines that go to the east from that direction.
There's none?
Yes.
Right. Well, I think there is one. I think there is one down 29th Street for a couple of 100 feet.
That's correct, but nothing extensive.
Is there anything in this that will
fix that? Not at this time.
So we take water from Douglas Boulevard all the way to northwest Oklahoma City, sell it to Edmond, sell it to Yukon, and so on and so forth, and we can't serve southeast Oklahoma City.
Main extensions are made as development occurs. The land developers are responsible for putting in pipes in arterial streets as part of, and we cross participate with those improvements. What happens in the capital program, and sometimes that gets us in trouble, is that we backstop the improvements made in land development with major mains that then support the growing demand. And the reason I say that gets us in trouble, I think that the northwest quarter of Oklahoma City is a great example. We underestimated the demand that we get out of growth from the Kilpatrick Turnpike construction. You just saw a rapid shift in our new customer base along that new highway because we try to provide improvements on a real-time basis as the demand exists. We frankly just got behind in the northwest area, so that's why you see that major transmission main going out there. But the same approach would be true in Ward 4. We extend the lines. For example, there are a fair number of lines on Cedar. We have a 48-inch transmission main that runs east and west, generally helping supply water toward the 240 area. But yes, it is complicated. And I'm not sure I answered your question, but I tried real hard.
The old infrastructure question that we always raise. Thank you all. Craig, is there something you want to?
No, I think that's good.
Thank you all for your work and your presentation. We'll be delighted to get back to you with questions. We promise. Okay, we're to Planning Commission committees. Planning Commission members. I have one. We need planning commissioners to participate in the OKC plan work, and 3 of us have signed up to participate in one or more of those activities, Todd being one, Bob Wright being one, I think. We need some participation from others of you on, there are 8 areas of study, if you will.
Actually, I filled out an application, but just got dog-ate.
Lost now.
Dog-ate.
Dog-ate it?
Actually, Commissioner Bright, Commissioner Williams, and I are sort of triangulating the groups that we can participate in, knowing that there's a limit to the number of planning commissioners that can be present in any one of those things at a time. Maybe that's not going to be a problem, but
I don't think it will be. From what I can tell right now, won't be a problem.
But I've signed up. I'm going to do 3 of those subcommittees, that are of interest to me.
Well, Susan Miller,
but I'm going to do 3 of them.
And please do.
Yeah.
But Susan Miller is a contact person. She would appreciate each of us participating in at least one. And so we get exposure as Planning Commission to all of the different aspects of the plan as it comes forward. So I mentioned that.
I've got a question. Several years ago, and I think it was right when I came on the Planning Commission, there was a project that encircled Draper Lake. Big hotels and restaurants and all this stuff. And that's within that conservation area. I don't see how that fits.
I voted against it.
Nobody can.
And I don't think it's anywhere near on the drawing board for anything. It's disappeared.
That was a large, huge project, and they were multi-story hotels and all kind of high impact type things, within that Draper Lake conservation area. Seems as though sometimes we have a double standard.
I think there was trickery involved in that. It was there was some one of these trusts that have been organized to do what they want to do without regard to what the city wants to do. I think there was a trust organized that they put that whole thing together, and it was kind of fait accompli. It was like, we're already doing this, you guys, here you are, and they presented it, but it was all in that environmental conservation area. It was, marinas, boathouses, hotels, restaurants, etc. It's a huge thing, and I think, Russell, it's still on the books.
Well, I'm not aware that it's going anywhere, but
It's a Versant Water Trust.
I can't imagine that resurfacing under the current economic
Okay, my question
conditions.
is, if we approved that, is there a 5-year period like these plat things that they die after 5 years?
Well, I wasn't part of that, so I don't know what the conditions were, or what it was approved as.
Did you look into that?
I think maybe that proposal, even though it was put together and paid for by the city, I think that proposal was put out to private industry to do it, and it just fell on its face. Okay, yeah, nothing ever happened. And another thing I think we really need to watch is when we zone a piece of property similar to item number 2, and when they set aside property like item number 2 did for us, and it was there, and we knew when we zoned it that they were going to come back for commercial. We knew that. And, yet we went ahead and zoned it anyway. And I think we really need to start watching and paying attention to what we're zoning, from now on.
Well, you get into a difficult, or at least an awkward situation in that a landowner may own that entire tract. Applicant comes in and says, I'm going to buy all but the western 100 feet of that tract along that site and do residential, and I'm not buying the other part. So we're dealing with an application where we're dealing with the entire site that applicant intends to work with,
right.
But he hasn't bought the entire tract owned by the seller, and there's no way we can compel him to do that.
Well, that's true, but and on the other hand, the similar situation that we got, and I can't think of the subdivision, one that the court just kind of shot us down on. We zoned that piece of property and then turned around and said, no, you can't develop it, because the infrastructure is not there.
I think I have a fundamental difference between the two, because quite frankly, in the application with respect to number 2 is the owner withheld that tract. Remember this, in that one, he sold my understanding of how the transaction went, he reserved that. Yeah. So, as far as I'm concerned, he was a volunteer. He did it intentionally, with potentially, and you're right, Jimmy, the result being is he wanted potentially to come back and zone it, but part of the problem is that the nature of the application process is quite simple. We can only act on what's in front of us. And if a piece of land is segmented by the owner's initiative, I don't feel the need necessarily to sometime in the future go, well, nothing else will be there, so it has to be commercial. I don't like that.
Nor do I.
Not an entirely is my point. I understand your point. It's going to be a troubling strip now, but I didn't build it.
We had another example this afternoon, and that's the fellow, I forget his name, that had the subdivision and the commercial off of the gravel road on 122nd. Traffic, we're going to have a traffic impact study at final plat stage, etc. We made the right decision. Continue this thing. Don't do the rezoning until you know what it is you're going to do. Then that really is, I think, what we need to be aware of. The rezone, well, it's done. nothing else you can do but continuing it, letting it, simmer and see what happens. I think that was the right decision.
Well, the problem is we don't yet have the capacity within the city staff to do traffic planning, infrastructure planning ahead of development. And the only capability right now for that is in the private sector. And that's a shame because it means we really can't do good planning in many instances. We don't have the tools we need. Planning department.
I mean, ACOG is still working on that traffic model for the city. They're about a year and a half late on that, but that is going to help us on that when that is finally done. And that is the large part of the missing piece on that. I had a couple of things. Thanks, John, for the solicitation on participation, because that is important to us that you're engaged in the process. Your ownership is important. We have on November 18th, we have a study session. We're going to pursue further discussions on connectivity at that point in time as a result of the previous discussions on that. And
I emailed Susan today. I cannot be there.
Yeah, I know.
I'll be for the meeting, but I won't be there for the study session.
There is at least that topic. I don't know if we have any others at this point, but we also have an Urban Development Committee on an ordinance amendment, which is to address the topic of demolition of buildings in the design districts. And you can guess where that was generated. We also, on a positive note, we recently received a $500,000 grant to assist us in development of the plan. And that's going to be an enormous aid to us. We're very fortunate in receiving that. I guess we had a well-written application, but it was extremely competitive, only 40-something out of 500-something applications. I think the fact that all the things that we're looking at doing and the fact that we're in the middle of the comp plan process really assisted us with that. The priorities that we've encapsulated in the comp plan met with what HUD would like to see, and this is actually a HUD DOT, one of that new sort of synergies going on between federal departments. And that's going to help us enormously because we can now start to do some things that would have been very difficult or very time-consuming to do in-house. We've been trying to do this thing on the cheap, but it is a massive undertaking because it is the comprehensive plan. And I was always aware that it was a lot to bite off and chew on, and it's been quite a stress load on staff, and this is going to help us in a number of different ways. It'll enable us to be able to do a citizen survey, for example, that'll give us some statistically valid response from citizens about particular options within the comp plan. It'll enable us to do a little more analysis on the infrastructure growth relationship and how that affects how we should grow as a community. And we also currently underdoing an employment land study, which is sort of industrial lands and what we need to be able to continue to attract employers and quality employees to the community. And we think that we can add to that with a strategy study on retail as well, because retail is obviously the fiscal engine for the city. But beyond that, what we want to do is to look at retail in a much more sustainable model than a current approach, which tends to settle in an area for 20 years and then move on again. And then we get left with these large declining or abandoned areas of retail. We want to try and work on a more targeted approach to retail so that it's sustainable over the longer term and more predictable for us in terms of our
that relates
long-term
to
fiscal health.
Infrastructure and infrastructure planning, and also relates to maybe rethinking the urban growth boundaries and where they ought to be and how far out they ought to be and how, we sort of say, oh, well, within the next 20 years, we're going to do X and Y, that's just like wide open. I mean, it's not really planning.
Yeah. You know,
Yep.
well, you heard that we're kind of following development. I mean, you heard that from some of the department heads there, and I think it would be more prudent for us to understand where the infrastructure should go, and help in guiding development. I mean, it'll be a balance, but we're being drawn into areas that we can't afford to be drawn into, and that's really hurting us in terms of our ongoing budgetary capacity. So this $500,000 grant is a real...
Well, congratulations. Excellent. Well, municipal council's gone, so we don't have that department, and there are no citizens to be heard, so we're adjourned.